turn it over to our executive director, I think.
No, you start.
No, I start.
You're the boss.
Well, I'm currently the vice chair of the board, and we have a full day today. We have some new members. We want to start by thanking folks that have been board members for a long time, Elena and Catherine. So now we have a couple of new public members, Karen Gear, recently appointed. We also have Damon Nagami and Fran Pavley, who've been reappointed. Hurrah. And Miss Pavley's on the way, en route from the airport, we think. We have a quorum. And our sister Fish and Game Commission does its own annual discussion on who is president and vice president. And each year the president joins the board. So welcome, Erica Zavaleta, the president of the Fish and Game Commission. One of the powers of this Wildlife Conservation Board is its close relations with our Joint Legislative Advisory Committee. They've participated consistently over the years. That committee is now comprised of Senator John Laird, Senator Catherine Blakespear, who are new to this dynamic. We've kept Senator Henry Stern. We have Assembly Member Diane Pappen join us, and I believe her staff is here today, Stephanie Mitchell. Assembly Member Steve Bennett, Rick Zerb rounds out our advisory committee. And we also have one last new public member, Tina Thomas. Many of us know as a longtime practitioner in the kind of natural resources space. Tina, I think, was overseas vacationing, so she's not actually here today. So let us call roll, Mary, and establish a quorum, and we'll get going.
Member Tina Thomas. Vice Chair Bonham.
Here.
Michelle Perrault. Here. Member Damon Degami.
Here.
Member Fran Pavley. Member Karen Gear.
Here.
Member Erica Zavaleta.
Here.
All right, so we got a quorum. A couple of other introductory remarks before we do approval of agenda. I briefly said a quick thank you to Alina and Catherine Phillips, but I mean, they were essential to what this board has become, and I look forward to seeing them hopefully in the future as participants in the process, but we'll never forget their board service. And then many of us have been making sure to start each of our public venues over the last 60 days with an acknowledgement, pause for just the deep, immense personal tragedy and impacts in the LA region from what are truly like unexperienced catastrophic wildfire dynamics. And the state administration through Governor Newsom has been present there in the basin in an unrivaled way in any of our history in emergency response, recognizing the dynamic impacts people down to the most personal and also across the most programmatic in policy, kind of how do we rebuild and deal with this? And I would say in that context, don't lose sight of how people have come together to focus on this rebuild. I think yesterday, the Newsom administration announced that in less than 30 days, federal and state crews have substantially completed wildfire hazardous debris cleanup for both the Eaton and Palisade fires, and in record time has done the metrics of cleaning up at such a scale faster than any other previous event like this. So it is literally all hands on deck. Like 99% of properties have already been assessed, cleaned up, or deferred. About 9,000 cleanups have been completed. About 13,000 parcels assessed. So the workload is immense, ongoing, and has been very kind of record setting. And we owe a thanks to the Trump administration and the federal government for partnership in that cleanup effort happening at record pace. Damon, I know you're from there. I know Senator Pavley would want to say something if she were here, but I turn the mic over to you.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, Mr. Vice Chair. Just really appreciate the acknowledgement, this being the first WCB meeting since the events in Southern California. And as an Angelino, just appreciate those words. And we've been through a lot down there and just have appreciated the kind thoughts from folks all over the world who are watching. I just want to say that I think WCB can be instrumental in the recovery. It's going to be a long journey. And I think a robust, thoughtful, and equitable recovery from the wildfires is absolutely necessary. And I'm excited about the opportunities that WCB, the role that WCB can play in that recovery. In terms of restoring habitats and communities' access to nature. So look forward to doing that together. Thank you.
Now to you or still me? Oh, let's do approval of agenda. We'll get a rhythm here.
I just have one edit, which is that we're going to not just elect the board chair, but also the vice chair in item 5. It's no mission.
Any concern about the agenda, or do we have a motion to approve?
Second.
Do we need a roll call for that?
I don't think we need a roll call. We're done.
Okay.
Keep going.
Vice Chair Bonham,
Oh, no, she's calling it. It's all right. She's the
Yes.
boss. It's fine. Keep going.
Vice Chair Bonham,
Yes.
Member Nagami,
Yes.
Member Pavley, Member Perot. Aye. Member Gear,
Yes.
Member Zavaleta. Aye. Motion passes.
Awesome. Now we're over to.
Now it's
our
my
executive
turn.
director.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chair Bonham, or
Second.
Vice Chair, excuse me.
Did I
So
say
I have a
so?
fairly lengthy report. Bear with me. I have a lot of things to say. I want to start with, we issued on Monday our year in review. It came out by email. I just want to give a word of thanks to Mark Topping and Meredith Fleener on your staff who helped us put it together, but all the staff. We had a great year last year, board, those of you that were with us, and those of you that are just getting here, this is what you have to look forward to. Last year, we granted $320 million for 120 projects, which is pretty exciting. And this board has a big focus on equity, so I want to highlight some of the equity accomplishments that we had. You'll recall that we had an equity subcommittee spearheaded in large part by Alina Bokde and Damon. And through that process, we developed a matrix to identify how a project benefits a justice community. Our staff went back and looked at all the projects that we had approved last year and determined that 60 out of 120 had a direct benefit to justice communities, which is exceeding the 40% goal, and we are really proud of that. So $200 million out of the $319 million went to justice communities. As part of that, 23 projects were working with Native American tribes. 3 of those were ancestral land return projects. Those of you that were here for those meetings know how big a deal that was. We also had 11 that included traditional ecological knowledge in the restoration design and planning, and 5 that had a focus on granting tribal access or co-management of conserved lands. So we feel like we are making good progress, still a long way to go, but really excited about the work at WCB. I want to point out that we didn't make it as long as last year because we have now, thanks to our new GIS specialist, we have story maps for every board meeting where you can zoom around the state and get a deep dive on what's happening, some of the highlights of the work that we did together. And those are collated in little QR codes on the back of the document, which is not here, and on our website. And we also have one for our tribal projects, so you can do a deeper dive on those. In any case, I'm really proud of our year in review. You also are probably waiting to hear about our strategic plan. It is currently with the board for their review. I hope to have it out for public comment in the next couple of weeks. So really excited about the progress we made on that. The workshops were really beneficial. We had some great tribal conversations, and now we have a draft out for your feedback and look forward to hearing from you. It's only 10 pages. Think about that. It's going to be really easy to review. We are also in the middle of budget negotiations. It's budget season, it's hearing season, lots of conversations around our base budget, but also, of course, allocations from Proposition 4 or the climate bond. I'd say stay tuned on that. We do hope to be able to offer prop funds for projects by spring. We hope to be able to offer that. And we plan to do a webinar so that those that haven't worked with us understand the different opportunities and how to apply. So keep an eye out for that. As always, get on our mailing list if you're not, because you don't want to miss it. And just so you know, we are going to let people know before it's open so you can be prepared. And I want to say this here, and I'm going to say it over and over again. It is not going to be a race like first come, first serve. We are going to evaluate our projects. We'll have an ongoing evaluation. So don't feel like if you don't get in on day one, all the money will be gone. That is not how we work. So, but we'll do a webinar. Okay. Next item. At our February board meeting a year ago, this board voted to give me the authority to approve project augmentations of less than $300,000 for the up to $1 million a year. So I just wanted to report out that we did use that fund. It was incredibly valuable to us. It meant that project partners did not have to stop work and wait for a board meeting to get additional funds. I'm just going to share out a list of all the projects. I won't go through them, but this will be in our notes from the meeting. So this is just to let you know that we did use that authority and plan according to the approval last year. We reset the million, so we're going to continue to use that authority moving forward. Everybody get a copy? Okay. Couple more things. At our last board meeting, there's Fran. Welcome. Uh-oh, sorry. At the last boarding, we talked about a project called Navarro Creek. It was a restoration project, and there was some confusion about whether we had tribal involvement in that project. And I just want to state for the record that, in fact, the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians is actually a project partner. So I just want to make sure we all know that. I think that's another good news story, but somehow it got missed on our agenda. I also want to just put out there, next item, that we had talked a year ago about trying to have WCB meetings in different places. I would really like to try to do that this year, now that we've got some stability in our ability to travel and move around, and we're done with the strategic plan workshops. I didn't put that on as something to vote on, but maybe it's something that we can discuss. I would look toward maybe August or November, just so we have a little lead time. But we do, as a result of our strategic plans workshops, we found some partners that were willing to help us host and put on a hybrid meeting at a pretty minimal cost. So that was a side benefit. So I'd really like to try to do that, maybe in Riverside or LA. Okay. And last, I want to call up John Walsh, who's the best. All right. See if I can do this. Coming over here.
Why is John being called up?
So John, if you don't know him, how could you not know him? He's our Deputy Executive Director for Acquisitions. He is my brain. He has taught me so many things about this work. He's a great travel buddy, loves coffee, and just a really good supervisor and a good guy. He's a really true public servant. He believes in what we do. He believes in doing it right, and just being an overall great partner to all of you. He really cares about the work you do. And that makes me really proud. So I want to present you with your plaque for 25 years of service. Yay. Anything?
No, I appreciate the acknowledgement, and I'm very fortunate to work here. And I wish I could say another 25 years, but I'd be in my here's to another 10 years. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Great. Okay. Back to you.
I saw John yesterday. I congratulated him for 20 years and he was quick to say, don't show me those 5. So he started when he was 10. All right, so just big picture, we're gonna go next to an item which I think is kind of board member updates, reports, which I think you have the preliminary. On the final
that's okay.
is also gonna include discussion and election of board chair, vice chair.
Yep.
But for big picture and run a show, we'll move through a couple of these administrative dynamics. We'll get to consent calendar. Then we'll go through discussion calendar. At each moment in discussion calendar, we'll have a staff presentation. Proponents that might be involved in a project might have an opportunity to speak. We'll have a reminder of people both getting ready to approach the microphone if they want to make comments on the agenda item, how people who are participating virtually can raise their virtual hand to get in a queue. We'll go through comments on each agenda item. We'll come back up to board for discussion, questions, then motions and approval. And we'll just kind of roll through. At the end of today's agenda, the board will take an executive session. And we won't close the meeting procedurally. We'll come back from executive session. Our council will make any report and then we'll close it at that moment. But effectively for the agenda, right before executive session, we open it up to public comment for anyone on an item not on the agenda. So if there's something you want to say to us that's not on the agenda, you will be coming at the end of the meeting. You don't need to voice that view on each agenda item. So if that makes sense, do we have any board member updates? And then we'll go to discussion on chair, vice chair.
Yeah, and I apologize. I did give you the preliminary agenda and it is reordered, but we're still covering all the
Yep.
points. So my apologies.
Anything from a board member or Senator Papley, I'd just say as you were in transit, we did take a moment to kind of acknowledge, note, underscore the immense tragedy and road ahead for the LA Basin. And I know as a longtime leader in the region, I would turn it over to you if there's anything you'd like to add just about.
Apologize for being late. Southwest has just one flight. It's rude. Late, which is not good. Anyway, I can't fix that right now. Yes, I welcome saying a few things, and just so you know, I'm serving as a vice chair for the Blue Ribbon Commission for LA County. So if you have some suggestions and recommendations, I would welcome them. We have all-day workshop on Friday and Saturday. We're working with several dozen highly respected professors from UCLA who are also working with the commission. There's about 18 or so of us on that. And it'll be recommendations to the Board of Supervisors within 60 or 90 days. So, but I'm glad to be able to serve on that, providing my local government perspective, state perspective, but also Wildlife Conservation Board perspective, because it really directly affects us. And I spent some time talking to the Angeles chapter director for the state parks. State parks were hit quite hard. You don't hear about them a lot because they don't send out tons of press releases, you don't see about them in the paper. But Will Rogers State Park, a historic park, completely destroyed everything. And it's been there forever. Easily accessible. People from all neighborhoods enjoy going to Will Rogers State Park, and it's important to tell the history and the hiking trails that go with it. Another park, lots of Topanga State Park was hurt, not just down by the Pacific Coast Highway, where they're doing a lot of the debris clearing, so to speak, but also in Upper Topanga State Park. Homes burned in the unincorporated areas as well as Pacific Palisades and Eaton Canyon. And they really need an idea of how to move forward in a timely manner for restoring watersheds, which will greatly affect Director Bonham fish But many things else. It's water quality, water supply for people and for wildlife. And trying to get the hills back so that if we have rain again, especially this next year coming through, we're very concerned about the runoff and the impacts on that. And another park that was devastated was Temescal Canyon. That's owned by the Conservancy and operated by the MRCA. It's adjacent to Pacific Palisades. The buildings, which host a lot of events for a wide number of groups, as well as the hiking trails, is close to where people live, significantly burned. It'll take years to recover. Joe Edmondson, who's the director for the Conservancy, lives in Pacific Palisades, and his home was completely destroyed. So he's recovering too. And if you live down there, I think everyone knows, 5 or 10 people. And the more you talk to people, you realize how much of an urban fire this was, not your typical wildlands. I live in the Santa Monica Mountains. It wasn't that kind of fire. It was really the high winds really found the structures. So you're going to see a lot of attention to building back better, so to speak, more resilient structures. But what will be a big challenge also is, yes, the ones that were burned down will be rebuilt, hopefully in a timely manner and built back better. But over about 80% of those structures in the area were built before 1980 that don't have to comply with all the building codes. And so speaking to our California Energy Commission and others, one thing that could be the state and other agencies, as well as local agencies, do sort of ramp up the building codes. And when we build back better, not just for the homes that were destroyed, but those in the urban interface areas and those that are going to be probably in the severe high-risk fire zone areas. We understand CAL FIRE is putting out new maps in the end of March, and it's, I suppose, good for making sure people are working together. And but it also, let me tell you, most of my neighborhood people can't get insurance anymore. And that's a trade-off as well. So interesting times, but the Wildlife Conservation Board is in a good place to be very helpful in sort of reducing a little bit of the tension between homeowners and the amazing amount of natural open space we have in our area. And so this was not your typical wildfire. So I look forward to sharing with you any stories you wish to hear about. And I'm sorry I missed your opening comments.
Thank you for sharing with us, Senator, and just two of my own personal thoughts. Of course, the tragedy at the human level, the people level is immense. And there is much still ahead to go through as communities. But it's my own view also that Californians, those in Los Angeles, also understand the importance of biodiversity in our natural world. And I think as this plays out, there is a very specific role for the Wildlife Conservation Board. And I welcome that, and I look forward to our engagement that way. And then secondly, our friend and colleague, Joe, that the senator mentioned, a few of us were on a conference call that Joe was involved in, like days after the commencement of the fires. And he was in his conservancy garb, which he wears. It's kind of like a park ranger uniform. And someone asked him why, and he said, "This is what I was wearing when my house burned down, and I don't have anything else." And those stories are countless now for people in the basin. So
Back into the house, so
yeah.
he couldn't get back into his house and had to stand and watch it burn, but it's subdivisions that burn. This is what you've never seen before, just tract after tract. And also lessons learned is the inadequate warning signals ahead of time. People, we've got to do a better job. And in LA County with 10 million people and 88 different cities, that cross communication is increasingly important. And frankly, the state parks and Wildlife Conservation Board, the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation and Conservancy, they're interwoven in all this area, and we all, it's a great asset for people as well as wildlife. So stay tuned, lessons learned. So maybe in the future, we can be a little smarter.
So let me quickly turn and see if any other board member has an update, and then we can move to discussion and decision on chair, vice chair. Any other? Our venerable colleague from finance, anything else? No? Okay. All right, so let's turn to chair, vice chair, and some new board members. And often our participants in the audience are kind of regular customers at the board, so you've observed this over time. But to the extent we have newer participants, I think it's useful to just remember back to an earlier age. There is an earlier moment of this particular board that was different. It had 3 board members. The director of the Department of Fish and then Game, the president of the Fish and Game Commission, and the director or designee at the Department of Finance. We have always had an advisory committee, but it had 3 members. Those 3 members perhaps didn't capture the full perspective and diversity of California. And it struggled with keeping a quorum, frankly. If you don't have 2, you don't have a quorum. So there's an important moment. The senator is in the legislature at the time, if I remember correctly, that under Governor Brown, our communities that participate with this board thought through how to expand that representation. And we now have, for many years, been a larger board, a board that captures better the geography of our great state, the perspectives of our great state, and it's reflected in, us sitting up here today. In a similar space, the board did its first strategic plan, started to really think through how it would provide transparent metrics on its decision-making, increase its engagement. You can see other trends like how we think about our fundees more holistically, how we embrace our sovereign nation partners. And we began a discussion, instead of every year just making an assumption that the chair of the board should always be the director of then the Department of Fish and Wildlife, we should open it up for discussion, consider rotation and like succession, career growth, all those things. So we've had different chairs over the last probably 4 or 5 years, and here we are at a moment where our most recent chair is no longer on the board. So discussion, board members, eventually someone's going to make a motion on who wants to be a chair. I'm currently vice chair. So there you have it. Damon?
So I'll kick us off. Thank you for the history lesson, Chuck. Really appreciate that reminder. A couple of things so I've been on the board for 4 years, and I've noticed a couple of things. First, just seconding everything you said about this expanded board, thanks to Senator Pavley and the legislature, reflecting the broader diversity and interests across the state. That I think applies to the chair and vice chair positions as well, to have a public member leading in a leadership position on the board sends a strong message to Californians that, we see you and we want you to have a stake in this venture. And that's a strong message. So for the last few years, I don't know how long, we've tried to have a public member and one of the original three departments in the chair, vice chairships because of both that interest in having that public face and public interest and the close partnership that the board, Wildlife Conservation Board and the department have together in terms of being bound through administration and objectives and things like that. So, but we can do it however we want. So I think folks have something they would like to try or to weigh in, feel free. I would be interested in sort of the way that has worked has been, you know, the vice chair being elevated to chair after a year. I've seen that happen very well in other boards. It's happened well here. And then, you know, somebody coming in to be vice chair. I have not been chair or vice chair yet. I'd be interested if that was something that folks would also be interested in. But for now, I'd be interested in nominating Chuck for chair of the Wildlife Conservation Board. And I guess I'll make that motion, but would love any discussion folks want to discuss.
I'd be glad to second that motion and I think that transition of vice chair to chair is, whether it's every year, or every 2 years, I think we've had that discussion before. I think that's healthy and I want to say that it was John Donnelly who came up with the idea of adding public members, yes, for quorums, but also to put a more broader public face, especially regionally speaking and diversity and everything else across the state. And I think it has helped more people know what the Wildlife Conservation Board is doing, how important it is. So when there's things like a ballot measure or Proposition 4, it makes a difference because people are seeing the impacts. I look at the map all the time on where they're doing projects and it's spread out around the state. And we can do more, but a lot of it is interfacing with the public. And I know we're trying to be time and money permitting, even more involved in the local communities and wanting to hear from them. So I'd be glad to second that motion.
Anyone else want to weigh in on chair and then we can turn to vice chair? Or do you want to do it as a slate?
I'm fine if we want to do it together. I'll
Yeah.
motion that we put Damon as vice.
I second that. Everyone's discussion.
Who, I didn't hear that. Oh,
Damon is vice
good.
chair.
All right. I just want to make sure I knew I was voting for.
Yeah, it is actually kind of hard to hear. Okay, any other discussion? Then we would need a motion proposing me as chair and Damon as vice chair.
I'll make that motion.
Someone else want to second it?
I'll second.
Or you want to make a roll call?
Vice Chair Bonham,
Aye.
Member Nagami,
I
Member Pavle,
Aye.
Member Peralt,
Aye.
Member Gear,
Aye.
Member Zavalete,
Aye.
Member Thomas. Motion passes.
Some congratulations. It's a big moment. I think that takes us to funding status, informational. And then we're almost at consent calendar, correct?
Yes, so in your packet, you do have the status of funds for WCB. You'll see all the different pots of money we're tracking, which I always like to point out to Michelle as part of what makes our life so interesting is all the little different pots, which we appreciate and love. But we are doing a good job of spending down the available funds we have. Right now, we have about 359 million on the books, but another $185 million of projects in development, which should make you plan ahead. I think May is going to be a big meeting, so might want to spend the night So, but we have a lot of work underway, really excited. And that's the status of our funds, if there's any questions.
I just have one. So are these, particularly for the bond acts, are these funds that are already appropriated to you, or are these just the
Yes.
balances of, so are there more?
I think there's
that are-
nothing left in the bonds for us to draw down. Somebody can correct me from my budget shop, but this is, I think, all of what we have on the books to spend.
I had a question, is the surplus general fund that still remains in a few counts or GGRF funds that were put into general fund categories,
Yes.
are they at risk between now and the end of the fiscal year?
Some of the funds that were shifted to GGRF or were still general fund, I can never keep track, about 35 million were proposed for budget solutions or to be backfilled with the bond, but the remainder is safe. So
And the general fund category?
I'm not off the top of my head sure
Okay.
which fund that was, but it was that
Right.
Sierra Cascades fund that kind of keeps coming in and coming out. That was proposed for a solution. So that was 35 million. And I think it was still general fund. Do you remember?
I think it was general fund.
Yeah,
but
I think so,
It
too.
it just moved, we moved it to bond.
So is it important to have them encumbered before?
Yeah,
the-
that is what you see on this list is we are actively working to make sure we spend, not only because we want to not lose it, but also because it's time sensitive. So we're making sure the general funds are spent and the
Okay.
GGRF. We have a little more time on that, but we're still moving quickly.
Thank you.
Sure.
So that would then take us to agenda item 7. Are there any project updates?
Yeah, we do. So as part of the general fund surplus, we had the opportunity to award some block grants, which you have heard about in this room. 2 of them, Point Blue and the Association of Resource Conservation Districts. We're going to have a quick update on those first 2, and then we'll get a slightly larger presentation on our block grant to the California Council of Land Trusts. So Kurt Malchow is going to come down and tell us about the first 2. Hey, Kurt. I think your mic's not on. Can you put the mic on? Oh,
Background,
there you
turn
go.
the microphone on. Everyone hear me okay? Great, okay, thank you. Good morning, board members, welcome new board members, and especially for the new board members, if I may begin with a quick background before I actually dive into the reporting itself. So at a special meeting in January 2023, the Wildlife Conservation Board approved over $70 million of funding for 3 projects to expand the pace and scale of natural resource conservation through a block grant structure. Under this approach, WCB allocates a larger grant. The recipient subcontracts out to multiple smaller projects or blocks of projects and collectively bills them back to WCB rather than the usual practice of one grant, one project. Block grants empower the recipients to build on their existing networks and technical expertise to plan and implement projects at economies of scale, enhancing our ability to help meet the statewide goals of conserving 30% of California lands by the end of this decade, the initiative known commonly as 30 by 30. On condition of approval, the board required for semi-annual progress reporting on block grants such as being done today. Next slide, please. So the first block grant is a $26 million allocation to Point Blue Conservation Science. And under this grant, Point Blue established the Roots Program, a community-centered habitat restoration program operating across the state to develop multiple projects on working lands. Over half of this funding is directed to projects in partnership with Native American tribes, disadvantaged communities, and historically underserved individuals. Project examples include riparian restoration as seen in the bottom image, hedgerow plantings, upland habitat restoration as seen in the upper right, and invasive species removal. As of now, nearly 100 projects have been approved and implementation will begin on most of these by the fall of this year. Half of the projects are taking place within underserved communities with about that same percentage of applicants working with a state-level conservation program such as this for the first time. Also, the map on the top left shows project coverage by county, 36 total here, where Point Blue has already surpassed their goal of operating in 35 counties throughout the state. Next slide, please. The next block grant of $24,731,000, also with Point Blue Conservation Science, focuses on accelerating meadow restoration through the Sierra Meadows Partnership, whose conservation goals are to restore 6,000 meadow acres, plan for 4,000 acres for future implementation, and prioritize an additional 2,500 acres for restoration. To address the time constraints of meadow restoration, Point Blue immediately began directing this funding to selected projects and has so far allocated over $9 million to 17 meadow restoration projects, over $5.5 million to 19 meadow restoration planning efforts, and about $3 million to projects that provide science and technical support to guide future restoration. This will make over 4,000 meadow acres ready for restoration, close to 3,500 meadow acres shovel-ready, reaching just over 2/3 of targeted meadow acreage to be restored over the next 2 years. Next slide, please. The final block grant of $19,413,000 goes to the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, or CARCD, to expand habitat for monarch pollinators as well as other ecosystem types. In this project, individual resource conservation districts throughout the state coordinate with the CARCD to implement multiple projects. To date, just over 40 projects are either ready or in planning stage. Here, significant progress has been made for outreach to underserved communities, with over 90% of projects providing a direct or partial benefit to disadvantaged communities. Over 1/3 of the projects involve working with tribal nations. In all cases, the RCDs work to support local community resources through their projects, as well as leverage California Conservation Corps participation where feasible. So in closing, in the past 2 years overall, the grantees have set up the infrastructure to administer grants, requested and reviewed proposals, navigated legal issues, as well as directly involved themselves in implementing a portion of the nearly 200 projects they have developed so far. We have project representatives joining us to address any questions the board may have. In person are Nancy Walsh-Shurik, Executive Director for the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, Liz Chamberlain, Director of Innovation for Point Blue Conservation Science, and Emily Mecki, Roots Program Coordinator, also with Point Blue Conservation Science. And joining us remotely are Heather Burnikoff, Project Manager and Tribal Liaison with the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, Ryan Burnett, Sierra Nevada Group Director with Point Blue, and Lisa Scoble, Sierra Meadows Project Manager, also with Point Blue. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the board?
Not a question, but a suggestion. I'd be interested if, Jen, you and staff, as we progress through these 3 first initial block grants, could also be tracking them for lessons learned on how you would do a potential second round, even more strategically or efficiently. Were there things you thought would work in the first round that you would want to tweak in the second round? And then I just make the observation, and a little bit of a joke. I mean, it could take the board 2 years to get through 200 projects at an approval kind of dynamic, to then have figured out a way to batch through, legitimate in the field partners to go to scale that way is very attractive for me. So,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Chuck. And thank you for the presentation. I mean, these results are incredible. I think when we had this idea of block grants a few years ago, this was exactly the type of progress I think we were looking for. The only thing I would add to Chuck's comments is if folks are here, I'd love to hear some just general feedback about how the applicants on the other side are viewing this opportunity. The lessons learned, I think, are going to be really important, but just, is this something that folks have been waiting for? And, what else can we do to support continued progress?
yeah, come on down, y'all.
Liz Chamberlain with Point Blue
And
Conservation
so
Science.
just for the rest of the day, when you come up to the mic, help us by introducing yourself. If you want, if you are affiliated with an entity and you want to make that known, please let us know.
Go for it. I think we're coming up as a group, and hello, everybody. It's great to be here today. So we can address this question of lessons learned. I
And
think,
your name is?
can you guys hear me? Oh,
Yes.
is this
And-
better? I'm Liz Chamberlain. I'm Director of Innovation with Point Blue Conservation Science. Great to see all of you again or for the first time. I think we're going to answer this question as a group. We all work together collaboratively since the inception of these block grants. We worked with our really important partners at CARCD together with the fantastic staff at WCB. I can't emphasize strongly enough that an important lesson learned from all of this is how important it is to be able to work with partners and staff who are as excellent at collaborating and clarity and transparency and all sorts of things as our staff with WCB. So it has truly been a pleasure. We feel really fortunate to be able to be in this position of implementing the Roots program and the Our Sierra Meadows Partnership Block Grant, as well as, I know Nancy will speak for herself in a moment here. So lessons learned we did in the report that we just submitted include kind of a set of testimonials. We surveyed our Roots program, our entire set of applicants that we've been working with, sent down a survey, asked people for permission to share comments that they had. And we're also interested, an organization of scientists, we think about adaptive management. So we're always interested in thinking about what feedback comes in for us, where can we improve, where can we move faster. We've learned a lot about, I think, the logistical side of grant making over the last 2 years, something that, you know, many of you are experts in. We had some lessons learned there. It took us, our first year, we had a very strong intention around working with people who hadn't accessed conservation funds before, and we were really willing to take that time and invest in those projects. So we put quite a lot of effort into what we call technical assistance, which is an umbrella term that really captures a period of time spent working with people on the land and helping them figure out what are the project goals that we can collaboratively develop, and how do we help people through the hurdles, the processes of putting together an application, a budget, clearing CEQA and environmental review, which Kurt has been an amazing partner on the WCB side. It's a lot of extra work for him, so I just want to acknowledge that as well. And helping people through the contracting process, which can be a bit of a barrier. That's something that, you know, that's something that can be intimidating for people the first time through conservation funding. And then we stay involved with our grant partners, with our grantees, helping support them through the implementation of projects and the monitoring. So it's a lot of investment on our side, but we think it has really incredible results in what we're seeing on the ground statewide. I'm going to pause for just a second. I'd like to, Emily, she left me, but I just want to check and see if we have some additional lessons learned. I can say, you want to step up? While she's coming up, I want to say that that's something that we're tracking intentionally. So we've set up in our project performance task, or task 4 of our block grant, an intentional study where we're tracking lessons learned, what were barriers, where can we make improvements to the way that we're implementing this work, where are the opportunities, where are the challenges. And we have also brought on a conservation social scientist, my colleague Liat Wild, who is here, helping us examine these challenges and opportunities from a rigorous social science perspective. With that, I just want to check with my colleague if she has anything to add. All right, and I'll pass off to Nancy.
Thank you so much. I have to just echo our,
Say who you are.
oh, sorry. I'm Nancy Walsh-Shurik. I'm the Executive Director of the California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, CARCD. I started out as the program manager on this grant, and now I'm the Executive Director, and I'm very proud to have Heather Bernikoff, who's here online, managing this project and also acting as our tribal liaison. So we're very fortunate to have her skills added to the mix. We basically every day thank the stars for WCB, the best agency ever. We love working with you. We love working with Kurt. I just can't say enough. You want us to get the work done, and you help us get the work done. And that whole approach is just, from the very beginning, is just amazing. It's really, really nice to be so positive when we're being hit so bad by the federal grants that are, it's very, very bad for us. And so I'm just emotionally fraught, but very happy to be here with you today. We are grateful for with what was just implemented, which has been a huge help for us, is the ability to get advances. That's helped us a great deal with our cash flow. We're a small organization. you know, we grew to accommodate this, but then we grew in other areas too. And so the advances have just made it much easier for us to keep our RCDs whole, particularly important now while we're missing millions and millions of federal grant funds. And so that is a big, big win for us. We had, you know, RCDs love the block grants because we're able to, while we reduce the administrative burden on WCB, we also reduce the administrative burden on them. And we really have no complaints at all about this grant from any of our members or partners. I would say the only thing that the biggest challenge that we have, which I don't think we're ever going to get around, is we work so much on working lands, and the landowner agreements are, you know, they're challenging. The good news is many of the RCDs, well, a small number of the RCDs had experience with this when we did 2 other mini block grants with WCB, and have just learned how to make it work, or just know which landowners aren't going to do it, and then you go work with someone else. We really have not lost, well, we've never had to like not complete a project. We've just maybe had to find different landowners to work with. But that's really the only thing that I can say is challenging. We're just so excited for all the work that we're getting done. So grateful that we can do this. It's particularly heartening to be able to be doing good things in a good state under the current circumstances. So thank you very, very much. And thank you for letting us keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Heather Bernikoff, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah, good morning. It doesn't look like I'm muted, so I think everybody can hear me. Tuyokaria, good morning. This is Heather Bernikoff. I'm the project manager for California Association of Resource Conservation Districts, as well as a tribal liaison. So I wanted to echo the thanks that my colleague and executive director, Nancy, just provided. But I did want to also add to that in terms of the pace and scale that the board members were talking about, that the other benefits of the block grant really are helping you guys to reach and build the capacity of smaller organizations that would never be able to administer the projects and work with, the pretty significant regulatory structures and requirements on their own. And that helps us reach into a lot of underserved communities and broad, diverse communities across the state of California. Another benefit and I'm really proud of, that CRCD is a learning organization, and as such, we really convene our sub-grantees, subcontractors, the other small RCDs that we talked about, to learn from one another and be able to implement project ideas in ways that they hadn't thought about, which also increases the pace and scale. Being a block grantee, we have a 30,000-foot view of what everybody's doing, so we can create these so-called marriages between RCDs to be able to mentor the others, and again leverage that knowledge that maybe a small RCD doesn't have, but a larger one does, or perhaps a smaller RCD that works with tribal communities or other underserved communities has already cultivated and established, and they can actually teach and help larger RCDs be able to understand that. So I just wanted to share that that's another very positive aspect of the block grants. And of course, we'll be coming back to under the Oak Woodlands project that you guys so wonderfully provide opportunities for, just simply because of that. And we are actually able to leverage some of the other relationships that have been created in this project, and we'll have more tribal communities and underserved communities represented. So thank you, Chokwetesia in my language. Thank you so much for all the contributions you make in our communities and our state. Thank you.
Right back at you with the thank you.
Bridget, you should also be able to unmute yourself.
Bridget, are you out there? And one more call and we'll keep moving through. I think we'll come back up to board members next. Okay, not hearing Bridget. Any other follow-up questions from board members?
Yeah, this is less of a question than just a comment. I think I'm the new kid on the block, so I'm still learning about how all of this works, obviously. But I just want to put my finger on what I see as another really strong benefit of this process. So in addition to everything that's been articulated, so far. I'm really, really interested in the potential for us to learn from the different ways that block grantees strategically plan how the projects add up to more than the sum of the parts. Because I think, so much of the thinking that I understand we're doing, across agencies has to do with climate resilience, has to do with connectivity, has to do with sort of regional planning and what I'd be really interested to hear a little bit further down the line in the process is how Point Blue, how the Resource Conservation Districts, like how, and then how maybe even sub-grantees or folks who are recipients of those block funds are thinking about, these bigger picture, how does the sum of the projects add up to enhancing resilience, like really targeting those key places that allow movement, allow people to adapt and so on. So I'd be really excited to learn more about that down the line from all of you. Thanks.
Hi, thank you for the presentation.
You can unmute yourself.
Well, hold on, we're up at the podium with board members.
Sorry for that. I'm a big supporter of block grants. It's a great efficient way to get money out on the ground. And I know that one of the challenges in the past has always been the CEQA issue. So I don't know if you're targeting projects that fit in the exemptions and that's how you're dealing with it. But if you found another way of helping to streamline that process to share with other agencies, I think that would be great because I think that is often a stumbling block. And I know from my experience at the Coastal Conservancy, sometimes when we did block grants, we had to have people come back for a board approval of the CEQA document when the project was defined, which kind of a little bit negated some of the purpose of streamlining. So anyway, sharing how you do that and handle that and any suggestions for others who are working on these, I think would be really great.
And amplifying Karen's comment, I do think the board has and remains in a position to kind of set best practices for the broader restoration kind of apparatus in California. So awesome. I think this.
I'm just making sure nobody else on the phone needs to comment. It's a little hard to tell. Let us know, Geneva.
Yes, Heather has her hands raised.
Okay,
You should be
great.
able to unmute yourself.
Thank you so much again, and I promise I'll be short. I just, to one of the board members' questions with regard to strategy, I'm just super proud of some of the elements of the block grant that were created by Nancy and previous colleagues. We are actually doing that to some regard. One of our partners, Xerces Society, is we've been working with them as part of this block grant process to really take a look at the gaps. And our focus, of course, is on the monarch butterfly habitat, but that, of course, helps bumblebees and other pollinators and a number of other wildlife concerns. And so we are actually looking at that from a even higher 50,000 level view of how can we fill those gaps, what those strategies look like. And they've actually been putting together a wonderful habitat map, and we have identified an area that we're going to actually test how that can work and in terms of using that strategy, the lessons we learned, and then filling one of those gaps for connectivity. So thank you so much for bringing that up, and I apologize for interrupting again. I just wanted to share that that is something that we're doing, and we will certainly make sure we provide that more information on that in the next report. Thank you again.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I think we're right at consent items.
Nope,
No,
sorry. We do have a full presentation
okay,
from Carolyn Godwin, who's the new executive director of CCLT,
okay.
freshly minted, who's going to share about the CCLT block grant, which we have not heard about before. This was actually an update. This is a new. So welcome. Don't feel pressured. We're moving along, but take your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, members of the board, for having us here today. My name is Caroline Godkin, and as Jen mentioned, I am the newly minted Executive Director of the California Council of Land Trusts. I started in December, so I don't have quite all the answers yet, but fortunately we've got a great team here if you have any questions. I have regrets, unfortunately, from Bridget Fithian, who's our board president. She was unable to join us this morning. I'm pretty sure she's listening in on Zoom though, so just if there's more questions. A little bit about me. I was incredibly fortunate to serve in the administration, both at the Resource Resources Agency and Cali, PA, under two governors, Governors Brown and Governor Newsom, before heading off into the world of nonprofits. And so I know I've crossed paths with some of you before in various different spaces, including in the legislature. So I'm really grateful to be in this spot today and to be here talking about this great program that we have with you all. As a way of reminder, we received $5 million from this board last year, in February of last year, and the split was approximately $3.5 million for grants as part of a block grant to the Land Trust community to increase their capacity to advance projects, and then around about $1.5 million for technical assistance that we would provide, again, to the broader Land Trust community, again, always with the eye on building their capacity to allow us to reach the 30 by 30 goals. I want to say a huge thank you to WCB staff and particularly Celestial. Just incredible partnership and support as we have built this program. And just a huge shout out to the CCLT staff as well. We're doing something really new and I'm really proud of what we've accomplished to date. And then it's always great to go slightly after other folks. And we've certainly learned a lot from the CARCD and from Point Blue. So really grateful for their partnership as well. Next slide, please. So just wanted to quick update on the progress to date. In phase 1, which we're currently in of the block grant, we received over 50 applications and over $5 million of requests. And we have now awarded $1.9 million of funds to 23 recipients. I think as of yesterday, we are actually fully under contract with all of the recipients. And then now we're looking at the technical assistance. So we're working with the contractors on identifying what we're going to be providing, and we're going to be starting to deliver that in the late spring and early summer. At the same time, we are going to be coming out with our second round of applications early summer of 2025. And that's really where we're going to take some of the lessons that we learned from the first round in updating our guidelines, in working with the team here at WCB, and just tightening up some of the things and some of the lessons we learned from the first phase. We will be, next slide, please. We will be, and Senator Pavley, you mentioned about the value of maps. We will be creating a map on our webpage, which will show where all of the projects will live, and we'll also have a separate for our Department of Conservation grant award, so you can really see across the state where we're going to be working. So I just wanted to, next slide, please. Just wanted to drill down a little bit on the project funding. So we've given out 23 projects, but with that money, that just close to $2 million, we've leveraged over $70 million of other funds. So our grantees are leveraging over $70 million. The average award was around about $80,000. But the minimum award that we gave out was $18,000 and the maximum was $150,000. So we had a whole range, supporting a whole range of different organizations. You mentioned, the priorities of this board in reaching different types of land trusts. So we had 2 grants, 2 tribally led projects. Non-tribal land trusts was about 7 who were working with tribal partners, and non-tribally led working in disadvantaged communities, that's a mouthful, we had about 4 projects. Really proud of the scope and the breadth of the projects that we received and how we were able to work with our grantees to allow them to be successful. I pulled out 3 examples just to show the range of work that we have been doing. So one was a grant to the Native American Land Conservancy, and that was to actually support them in developing a process to come to the State Lands Commission to talk about the school lands that is held by the State Lands Commission. It's one of those great capacity building, and it will help not only that land trust, but hopefully they will be able to transfer that to other tribally led organizations wanting to work with school lands. Next slide, please. The 40-Acre Conservation League is a great example of this money forming part of the puzzle as they have worked to put together their projects. And then finally, just to highlight the Ojai Valley, talking about water and the nexus of land conservation and water. Again, we have 23 projects and we're going to have all of the information on our website, but I wanted to just pull out the richness of what we've been able to achieve. Next slide, please. And then the technical assistance, what we've been able to do is that there are programs that are going to be directly funded by this board, but then also programs that we are funding with other fund sources, but also kind of the greater than the sum of the whole question to how we're combining funding. So our conference in March, we're going to have over 300 attendees and multiple tracks of training and capacity building for the participants. Specific to this organization, we have the programs that we have in the hopper include some best practices for GIS, some training for certified real estate appraisers, and some workshops on, how to successfully access public funds, because it's not always that easy. And again, we will be starting to roll these projects out in the spring. Next slide, please. So just to wrap up and reflect on some of the questions that you asked of the previous presenters, some of the lessons we learned is that the grant recipients are incredibly grateful for these opportunities. And it is filling in funding opportunities for places they may not have otherwise been able to seek funding. We are doing ongoing surveys with our membership, and we will be continuing to learn as we go through on not only updating our guidelines, but also our processes, how it has worked for the land trusts in terms of financially, and all of that other good stuff as we go through. And definitely, we're going to continue to work with the staff here and at other state agencies on bringing forward the recommendations, particularly as we move into thinking about the implementation of Proposition 4. What are other things that we can do to streamline and to benefit this community, ultimately to be able to deliver on the state goals. So with that, I'm not sure if Bridget is able to give a comment as well, but I will pause and ask if you have any questions.
I just want to make one comment, which is we really appreciate how you've showcased each individual subgrantee through your social media, because it's been a way to sort of highlight the breadth of work we do together. So I just want to thank you for that. We always like it when we're all out there together. So good job.
Hi there, this is
Go ahead.
Bridget Fithian. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak, and I apologize that I am not able to be there in person today. I'm Bridget Fithian, and I'm the board chair of the California Council of Land Trust, as well as the executive director of Sierra Foothill Conservancy. And I just want to express incredible gratitude to the Wildlife Conservation Board and your wonderful staff for working with us on developing this block grant. It is really so critical to helping us meet the very ambitious goals of 30 by 30. And if you recall, in the 30 by 30 Pathways document, building the capacity of the land trust community was one of the identified barriers and needs for investment in order to meet these goals. And so we're already seeing that after this first round of investment in our block grants from our grantees. They're gearing up projects. They are, working on planning initiatives, and they're also doing some of that deep work that we've really needed in our community to do things like incorporate tribal priorities into management plans and acquisition priorities. So these are some of the examples that you heard today, and also that I'm sharing of just the richness, as Caroline described it, of this programming and what it means for advancing these initiatives in our community. And we are thrilled to have Caroline joining us as our new executive director. We conducted a nationwide search and had really amazing applicants. And Caroline is an incredible leader with her, more than 2 decades of experience in conservation and working with state leadership. So we're just thrilled to have her joining us and leading the charge for the next evolution of the California Council of Land Trusts. I also wanted to make one note about Vice Chairman Bonham's comment around, lessons learned in this block granting process. And that's something we're very interested in doing, is convening a community of practice amongst the different block grant administrators. And so our friends at Point Blue and CARCD and some of the state agencies also administer block grants, like Sierra Nevada Conservancy, and bringing us together to, continue to learn from each other and learn different ways that we can streamline our processes to make our programs even more efficient. We are hearing from our grantees that they are really appreciating how these systems are flowing within the California Council of Land Trusts and the really expedited time frame from application to award and access of those funds. So, likewise to our other block grant grantees, we're hearing really positive things on how the program is flowing. So thank you for this opportunity, and we really look forward to continuing to work with WCB, particularly on the implementation of Prop 4 in block grant capacities.
Now I think we're at consent calendar. Okay, so here's how this is going to roll for the rest of the meeting. We're going to have Jen introduce the items 8 through 17. We have some amendments that people need to track. We will see if there are any board questions about the consent calendar. If you are the public and you'd like to make a comment on anything in the consent calendar, go ahead and raise your hand in the virtual queue and get ready to line up here in the auditorium. After that comment will come up if there's any discussion. After discussion, we need a motion and vote. So Jen, help us understand ministerially what's on and off consent.
Yeah, so a few changes. We pulled off, and you'll see this in your agenda, items 9, 10, and 14. And if you were at our last board meeting, you recall that I asked approval to accept funds from the Department of Fish and Wildlife for their 30 by 30 program because WCB was assisting with due diligence, and we were going to assist with actual disbursement of funds. Through a lot of rigmarole, we ultimately decided that we'd leave the funds at the department and we aren't going to bring those projects through WCB board. It's just it's simpler administratively, but we did do all the work on the back end. So those projects are moving forward that you see the names, but they're not coming before you. So that 30 by 30 fund, thank you for approving it. We didn't need the approval after all. So those are gone. And then we're pulling off for presentation the Sonoma Valley Wildlife Corridor study. So that will come as our first presentation item. So you'll see up ahead, the consent items are 9 through 17, excluding 9, 10, 13, and 14.
Okay, any questions about that consent calendar before we go to public comment? Amos?
Okay, thank you. Item 11, the South LA County Habitat Connectivity Augmentation. I remember that project and it's a great project. My question is, I noticed that matching funds had been withdrawn and that's the requirement for the augmentation. I was wondering if that is common, does that happen often? And then I have a sort of question comment after that. And actually which agency it was or whatever the source was.
I wish I had a younger brain. I remember why I remember the funds being withdrawn, but I can't remember the circumstances. I don't think it's super common, but I'm afraid it may become more common in our current environment. So that we do have a fair number of projects that are ongoing or in process that have federal matching funds. And I'll just point out that we don't know yet what's going to happen with those, but we do expect there will be other backfills that are needed.
Yeah, so I was going to use this to sort of flag this, and we've already heard it once from one of our stakeholders that, what's going to happen with especially federal funding in this environment is troubling. So just wondering, is this something that staff is tracking already and can report either back to the board, or can we sort of strategize? Because eventually we'll want to know, how big this issue is. Is it going to get worse? I don't know that we know that, but at least to sort of track what's dropping out from already approved projects. And then to hear from staff, what is not doable or what's not coming down the pike because funds that have been there in the past are no longer viable.
I will say we've had a few drills through Department of Finance, the Governor's Office on this topic. We do know that it's about $50 million in Section 6 grants that have already been approved, but those projects have yet to be brought to the board because we're still doing our homework on those. We think those are at risk. Obviously, there's other projects that are in process that could be 2 or 3-year-old projects that may have federal matching funds. I think what grantees are finding, and I know this is the case for us with Section 6, you don't know the money's missing till you go to get it. You can't really access the portal to request the money until you've sort of spent it and want to invoice it. So it's actually very opaque about whether you've got the money or not. I see Nancy nodding. It's kind of scary. So we think that 50 million is at risk, but no one's told us that yet, except our partners are saying, it's not looking good. So I think with ongoing projects, we're going to have to take them case by case. I'm confident that we don't have enough money to backfill every federal gap that's out there without.
We do not.
No, we do not. And even just at WCB. And that would mean that projects in process would then have to be put off. So I think we'll do our sort of standard approach, which is that we're going to evaluate based on where in the overall priority these projects fit, how far along they are, what the other opportunities are to make that work happen. And some things might have to get put on pause. And I hope that's not the case, but I'm sure it's going to be true. So we're going to deal with it case by case, but I'm more than happy to report back and keep track of those projects that we approved and that need to be paused or stopped. We'll definitely keep track of that for you and report back.
Thank you. Public comment. Okay. Do we have anyone in the room that wants to comment on the consent items? Seeing none, anyone in the virtual queue?
There are no raised hands.
Great. So we have a motion to approve the consent calendar as amended by
So moved.
second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Chair Bonham,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nagami,
Aye.
Member Pavle, Member Peralt. Aye. Member Gear,
Aye.
Member Zavaleta. Aye. Member Thomas. Motion passes.
Great. All right, so we'll start with agenda item 13 if staff wants to come down. And just a reminder, the rhythm is introduction by Jen, presentation by staff, any guest remarks. We'll go to board Q&A. We'll get the public comment lined up for in the room first and virtually. We don't dictate a time limit, but we do ask public comment.
2 minutes.
We do ask you to be concise
There's a timer.
and wow us in 2 minutes. And then we'll come back up for discussion, motion, vote. It's about 11:20.
Yeah.
Let's see what we can do between now and 12, and then the board will probably pause at 12 and see if we want to keep going and line up executive session, lunch, be most efficient.
Yep. Haley Peckner, take it away.
Good morning, board members. So agenda item number 13 is a proposal to consider an allocation for a grant to the Sonoma Land Trust to conduct a study to develop recommendations for the conservation and enhancement of the Sonoma Valley Wildlife Corridor, hereinafter referred to as the corridor, Sonoma Creek, and other public trust resources on the former Sonoma Developmental Center property. The former Sonoma Developmental Center property is approximately 950 acres of biodiverse land that lies at the heart of the corridor between Sonoma Valley Regional Park and Jack London State Park. Next slide, please. The corridor is an important wildlife linkage stretching from the Sonoma Mountains across Sonoma Creek and the valley floor and continues east to the crest of the Mayacamas Mountains. On the valley floor, the corridor is reduced to only 3/4 of a mile wide due to surrounding residential and agricultural development, therefore creating a pinch point that is important to maintain. The former Sonoma Developmental Center property not only makes up the largest property within the corridor, but it also lies at the valley floor, the narrow section of the linkage. As for the history of the project site, it was an operational developmental center for children and adults with developmental disabilities since the 1890s, until the facility was fully closed in 2018. Since the closure of the facility, most if not all of the buildings have remained vacant. The land surrounding the former facilities, however, is highly diverse, made up of montane hardwood forest, riparian, grassland, and wetland habitats. Over 600 acres of the former Sonoma Developmental Center property have now been transferred to state parks, and there are 2 proposed development projects on the property, including a CAL FIRE regional headquarters and a mixed residential commercial space in the core campus area shown on the map, which is where the developmental center facilities were previously located. Next slide, please. It is currently unknown what the individual or cumulative impacts of these proposed development projects will be on wildlife habitat and connectivity. So the study aims to better understand these impacts by compiling existing information and gathering missing information about habitat, wildlife use, and proposed developments within the project area. This information will then be used to develop an impact analysis that considers possible direct and cumulative impacts that the proposed development plans will have on wildlife and habitat. Next slide, please. These findings will then be used to provide recommendations for areas most appropriate for limited development and on development design guidelines to avoid, minimize, and mitigate the potential impacts to the corridor and wildlife habitat to the greatest extent feasible. These recommendations will play a part in ensuring that the habitat values and wildlife connectivity in the project area are protected at a critical pinch point and will help to avoid unintended consequences of the proposed development. Staff recommends that the Wildlife Conservation Board approve the project subject to the conditional approval, which Jen will be reading. And then lastly, we have Kim Delfino, President of the Earth Advocacy, to provide a comment on the project on behalf of the Sonoma Land Trust. And then additionally online, we have Chris Carlson, Sonoma Valley Stewardship Program Manager from the Sonoma Land Trust, to answer any additional questions.
So thank you, Haley. We brought this before you out of consent because this is a conditional approval. This project has not yet gone through the process of getting the final access approvals by the landowners, which include the Department of General Services, State Parks, and CAL FIRE. Those are in process, but they're just a little bit stuck. And we don't want to wait till May because it's a little bit late to get this project going. So I'm going to read the proposed motion, which is that the board approves this project on the condition that prior to the disbursement of grant funds and issuance of a notice to proceed, Sonoma Land Trust will provide to the executive director of the Wildlife Conservation Board signed access agreements to the project site with the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, California Department of General Services, and California Department of Parks and Recreation that allow Sonoma Land Trust to access the project site and conduct the necessary research to complete the project study. The board otherwise approves this project as proposed. So that's what's on your docket. Do you need to comment, Kim? Kim's going to come on now.
Kim, why don't you come up?
Good morning, Kim Delfino. I'm representing Sonoma Land Trust. And I will just say that this particular area has been a conservation priority for the Sonoma Land Trust and its conservation partners for a very, very long time, particularly because of that wildlife corridor. It is an important movement corridor for mountain lions and other species as they move from the Sonoma Mountain to the Myakima Mountains. And where the Sonoma Development Center is a particular pinch point. And so it's absolutely critical that we have a good understanding of how animals are moving through this area so that as we develop through the current proposal at the Sonoma Development Center and as with the CAL FIRE proposal, that we do this in the best possible way to not cut off movement for this wildlife through this area. So we really appreciate working with the Wildlife Conservation Board staff on this. I think we're very hopeful that we will secure the necessary access agreements. In fact, this morning I saw an email from CAL FIRE saying that they're ready to go. We have a meeting on March 11th that Resources Agency is facilitating with DGS and Parks and CAL FIRE, and hope to have the necessary approvals coming out of that. And again, this is an important, we appreciate the funding. We think this will really benefit the proposals moving forward, and hope to be able to lock down this funding. And I'll turn it over if you have any questions for Chris. He actually knows all the nitty-gritty details if you have any. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. Any board questions before we go to public comment? Seeing none. Any participants in the public in the room wish to make a comment? And anyone in the virtual queue to comment on this agenda item?
There are no raised hands.
So that brings it back up to the board. Any discussion?
I'd be glad to make a motion to approve this item.
I'll second.
I know this property. My brother-in-law lives in Kenwood nearby, so I've driven by, and it's an amazing opportunity. So thank you, Director Norris, for finding a creative way to move this through, especially during this sort of challenging fiscal time, subject to the approval of the agencies that you mentioned.
So we have a motion and a second approving the conditional approval read by the executive director. Could we get a roll call?
Chair Bonham,
Yes.
Vice Chair Nagami,
Yes.
Member Pavlo,
Yes.
Member Peralt.
Aye.
Member Gear,
Yes.
Member Zavaleta. Aye. Motion passes.
Okay, moving on, thank you, to Otay Mesa Habitat Restoration. We have Don Crocker presenting.
Thank you, Jen. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to the Chaparral Lands Conservancy for a project to improve the hydrologic and ecologic function of vernal pools and surrounding upland habitat. The project's in western Otay Mesa, which is a suburban and industrial community near the international border with Mexico. It's seen rapid residential and commercial growth over the last 20 years. The restoration work will be done within a 15-acre parcel known as the Clayton Preserve, which was acquired by the city of San Diego with assistance from the WCB in 2011. Next slide, please. The project site's a 5-acre section of the preserve, and it was once dominated by vernal pools and maritime succulent scrub, which is a subtype of coastal sage scrub. These habitat types typically occur in land that is considered prime for development, so they have suffered dramatic losses due to the urban and agricultural development that has occurred in San Diego County over the last 100 years. They are now prioritized for preservation and restoration by the Primary Resource Management Plan for the region, the San Diego County Multiple Species Conservation Plan. Sorry for my cough. This is particularly important for the vernal pool habitat, which has had its extent in San Diego County reduced by 95 to 97%. The WCB has recognized the importance of the Otay Mesa ecosystem and has approved multiple projects to protect and restore land there. Along with providing partial funding for the Clayton Preserve, which can be seen in red here, the board was involved in the acquisition of the adjacent Dennery Canyon Preserve in 2003. While Dennery Canyon has mostly retained its historical character due to terrain that's not suitable for development, the Clayton Preserve is on a flat mesa top that is highly impacted by human activities. In order to maximize the habitat value of its investment in the Clayton Preserve, the board has already approved 2 restoration projects there. The first was a 5-acre restoration project that was approved in 2017. This project has since been completed and was very successful at restoring vernal pool of maritime succulent scrub. The second phase of the restoration is also 5 acres, was approved in 2021. This one's still active, but it's already showing promising results. The project we are now discussing is phase 3 and will restore the final 5 acres of the preserve. Next slide, please. Here's a photo of the Clayton Preserve area that was taken in 1996. One thing you can notice is there are no houses around it. It was, at the time, it was really remote. And what you can see from here are tracks that are due to off-road vehicles. And these off-road vehicle usage is the largest contributor to habitat degradation there. The damage was severe because the vernal pools that once characterized the site were considered by off-road vehicle operators as mud puddles that were fun to ride through. Next slide, please. This diagram here shows the phases 1 and 2 of the Clayton Preserve restoration. Phase 1 is the segment at the top, and phase 2 is the one on the left. The blue polygons are reconstructed vernal pools, and the green shading is restored maritime succulent scrub in the upland areas surrounding the pools. Next slide, please. And here's the site map for today's project, phase 3. The light green polygons show where vernal pools will be reconstructed, and the yellow shading is the upland areas that will be restored. Next slide, please. These photos here, this is phase 3 site. is what it looks like today. The picture on the left shows a vernal pool that's been deformed by trenches created by off-road vehicles. And while it's hard to see, the other two photographs have vernal pools whose topography were so altered they can no longer create pools and water just drains through the area. All three pictures also show how invasive plants have come to dominate the site. Basically, all the vegetation you see here is non-native. Next slide, please. As opposed to the highly degraded habitat shown in the pictures of the Phase 3 site, the pictures here were taken at the recently restored Phase 1 site. The top left photo is maritime succulent scrub. The bottom one is a reconstructed vernal pool. And the purple flowers on the top right are the federally listed endangered species Otay mesa mint, which is flourishing after restoration. The Phase 3 project will use the same methodology as Phases 1 and 2 to restore 5 acres of habitat. This will include site prep and weed management using mechanical methods and herbicide treatments, grading and recontouring of degraded vernal pool basins, propagation and installation of container plants augmented by the dispersion of locally collected plant seeds, direct introduction of endangered riverside and San Diego Ferry shrimp cysts to the reconstructed pools, and finally, to maintain the improvements, fencing and irrigation will be installed. Staff recommends the project be approved as proposed, and in the audience is David Hogan from the Chaparral Lands Conservancy. Thank you. And I do believe David would like to say a couple words. David?
Morning, Chair Bonham, Vice Chair Nagami, board members. My name is David Hogan, and I'm the Executive Director of the Chaparral Lands Conservancy. Our mission is to protect shrubland ecosystems as an integral and beautiful feature of California's natural landscape through land preservation, restoration of endangered habitats and species, and natural resources stewardship. On behalf of myself and our board, thank you to the Wildlife Conservation Board staff for their recommendation and for your consideration today of a grant to fund the third and final phase of our Otay Mesa Habitat Restoration Project and for the benefit of imperiled vernal pool wetlands and coastal sage scrub, many dependent and listed and sensitive species. Over the last 8 years, we've worked to carry out the first 2 phases of the project on 10 acres of that property that was described by Dawn, and that was purchased originally and protected from development by WCB in 2011. The current grant will fund habitat and species restoration on the last 5 acres of the site for a total of 15 acres restoration over time. Project results have been nothing short of amazing. In 2017, we started with a site with enormous potential, some of which you saw in the before photos there, but it was still an ugly duckling covered with invasive non-native plant weeds and only a handful of vernal pools that looked more like tire ruts after years of off-road vehicle activity before the property was preserved. Things were so grim that only one single individual of the endangered San Diego button celery was found on the entire property. Since then, we have repaired and constructed nearly 60 vernal pools, planted those 10 acres of coastal sage scrub vegetation, and established thriving populations of tens of thousands of San Diego button celery plants, other endangered plants, fairy shrimp, spadefoot toads, and the like. Restoration has been so successful that even endangered burrowing owls and California gnatcatchers have moved in. Each one of the 33 pools on the current phase, the proposal phase, each one of the 33 pools on the original project phase now support at least 2 and some as many as 8 listed sensitive species, and just a few pools support thousands more individual Otay Mesa mint plants than existed anywhere on the entire planet in the early 2000s. We anticipate similar success with phase 3 of the project funded by this grant, where we will repair and construct approximately 46 vernal pools, restore 5 more acres of coastal sage scrub, and establish larger populations of those listed and sensitive species. And those benefits won't vanish once our restoration work is complete, because the site and the sensitive resources will be well managed in perpetuity by the City of San Diego, consistent with its vernal pool habitat conservation plan, which is also a state natural communities conservation plan. If approved, this will be our 5th grant from the Wildlife Conservation Board. Listening to the list of species benefiting from this project, San Diego fairy shrimp, Otay Mesa mint, vernal pool pincushion plant, and others, you would be correct to conclude that charismatic megafauna are few and far between in this corner of San Diego County. The Chaparral Lands Conservancy doesn't have the benefit of fundraising on wolves, salmon, mountain lions, or California condors. This is precisely why your support is so enlightened and crucial. You understand that even the most obscure native animals and plants are the glue that hold together entire ecosystems, and we are deeply grateful for your dedication to conservation of California's globally important biological diversity. Thank you for your consideration.
Great, so we'll come back up to the board real quick. Those in the room, those virtually. And I have two comments on this board agenda item. First, it's an important notation that the Wildlife Conservation Board has been with this since inception. So you funded acquisition and you funded 2 prior phases of the restoration work just described, and you now have the last phase of restoration. So you've seen something from birth to, growing up, I suppose.
Go to college.
Yeah. And that's great. And I think that's a testament to this board identifying partners, projects, special places, and getting it done. Second, for our new board members, you'll also see in the agenda board packet an exhaustive questionnaire. That is a newer practice for the board. For about 1.5 years or 2, we've been having an open discussion amongst board members, current and former, with our engaged partners about both the need to do restoration at scale, to do it smartly with least harm, how might herbicides and other products relate to the toolkit available for practitioners. It's an open discussion. There's differences of opinions, but the board has shifted best practices, and I think it's affecting communities in a positive way. We're applying much more rigor to those that come to us. We're insisting on a questionnaire that's available and published. We're really pushing people to decrease use where feasible, application of materials. So we've evolved and we're evolving. That's why you see that questionnaire. Any other comments from the board? Damon, before we go to public comment.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. I'm loving these backgrounders. They're great refreshers, even for board members that have been here for a while. I'm so excited about this project. These are not obscure species to me. I did Southern California habitat protection for a while, and so I see the fairy shrimp and hear about gnatcatchers, and I get excited. So thank you for your work. Vernal pools are the biodiversity powerhouses, and every time there's a project that has something like this, I get really excited. I also know that off-roading is a very it creates a lot of disturbance for habitat. So I'm just curious, has it really have the management practices been put in place, been able to sort of keep that activity out? These are among the most fragile habitats around, and I think the public could get a little nervous hearing about potential for off-roading. So I'm just curious, and just you could speak a little bit to the ability to do that. But just thanks for this project also.
Yeah, thank you for your support. That's a great question. This area in the 1990s was the Wild West. We're only about 2 miles from the international border. This was an undeveloped area of San Diego County. This is where this was a destination for off-road vehicle activity. Every holiday weekend or even regular weekend, the place was crawling. I mean, you saw the image of the old roads. It's totally different now. So the area is largely completely developed by residential and commercial development nearby. There's still the canyons and mesa top areas that were preserved under the San Diego MSCP Multiple Species Conservation Plan. So there's been a balance that's struck between the development and habitat preservation, but by nature of the development occurring, it's really blocked off access to off-road vehicle activity. So there's very little pressure for that now. It's moved east to where there's currently undeveloped areas, quite a ways east. And the site is totally secured with fencing and signs and the like. So it's just not an issue anymore. Thank you.
Any other board questions?
Following up on that, one of those aerial photos, I think the first one, it looked like the land like to the north was all graded. Is that going to be developed? Or?
Go back some slides. It's pretty much, the site is surrounded on three sides by development. There's still one side, the east side that's connected to a large canyon system and down to the Otay River. So there is habitat connectivity.
Yeah, I saw it that
but
way.
it's-
The other side looked like it was being prepped for something.
Yeah,
That's what I
exactly.
was
That
just-
whole west side is now
It's gone.
condos. Yeah.
Okay. And then my other question just was, now that you're 2 phases in terms of the vegetation management, like how much are you having to put into, keeping the weeds out of what you've done? Have you got enough of a native habitat going that it's going to move towards self-sustaining, or is it just always going to be a weed management issue?
It's, there's always going to be a relatively small element of weed management, but it's really, it's just so good. It's night and day. So you've got shrub cover that wasn't there before. That's really, that provides the competition to minimize the weeds. But even more important than the shrub cover is developing living soils, the cryptobiotic soils that were totally eliminated on the site with the weeds. Because we've knocked the weeds back so hard to begin with, those living soils have come back and we're getting the shrub cover. So the weed cover is far reduced. And then, what I'll say again, just to be clear, is that once we're done with the project, that weed management and control and supplementing management of the site will continue in perpetuity, actually, under the City of San Diego's Vernal Pool Habitat Conservation Plan that anticipates just that kind of long-term management and stewardship of the site forever, basically.
Any public comments in the room? Not seeing anyone queuing.
I had one
I'm sorry.
just observation, not a question. I'm certainly supporting this, and I talked to Director Norris about this. In the future, I would just suggest if we're using and continue to be able to use greenhouse gas emission reduction funds from AB 32, it's from fossil fuels, and they're usually for adaptation or mitigation purposes, and you can make a good case for many of these projects. I think a short paragraph or a couple of sentences in your reports.
So that's actually a comment
Could
for me.
focus on
Oh, I'm
that.
sorry.
Yeah.
Fran. So during our pre-briefs, you requested, and thank you for that suggestion, we're going to add when we use GGRF funding, and in future, we're going to add a bit about how it helps with our climate goals. And I think that's an excellent suggestion to tie those pieces together, whether it's mitigation.
Because you
or
can
building
make the
resilience.
case, and I think the public needs to see that link.
We will
And
add
Prop
that.
4 expenditure of dollars will do that too, because there's going to be a lot of competition, especially in tight budget years, for looking at that. And people may say, no, this should only go to A, B, and C. And so, okay, good.
And I think it's a great way to make the case that biodiversity conservation helps us.
They
with our
don't
climate
have to
goals. It's really
overread
important.
into it. They can just look at it and see, okay, that box checked.
Great. Thank you, Cindy. Okay, do we have any public comment in the virtual queue? And if so, how many?
9 raised hands. Bob Burns, you should be able to unmute yourself.
And I think what we'd like is those that are getting ready to comment to keep an eye on what you should see on your screen, which is a timer. And I'm a pretty polite person. I won't, be too harsh, but we're asking for people to keep an eye on that 2-minute marker. So with that, please call our first speaker.
Bob Burns, you can unmute yourself.
Great. Thank you, Bob.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Robert Burns. I'm a member of the California Native Plant Society. I am actually co-chair of the Habitat Restoration Committee of the San Diego chapter of the CNPS. The statewide CNPS holds that herbicides are an essential part of maintaining biodiversity. And this project is one of those instances where herbicides are very important. Both the Chaparral Lands Conservancy and Recon are very highly regarded here in San Diego. And I have visited that site, and it's a beautiful place. It's wonderful to see. So I strongly urge approval of this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Ginger, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello. Okay, we'll go to the third and come back to that individual.
Michael Carroll, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yes, Michael, thank you.
Okay, Mike Kelly, I'm Conservation Chair and Secretary of the Friends of Los Penasquitos Canyon Preserve in San Diego. I first met Dave Hogan back in the 1990s, believe it or not, when we were doing interpretive walks to the Carmel Mountain vernal pools. Later, our organization supported Dave on vernal pool projects on Carmel Mountain and the Del Mar Mesa. And like those projects, I know Dave will be using a variety of different integrated pest management tools, including cultural, such as education, mechanical, and chemical control of invasive weeds on this new project. He's a very thorough planner in our experience and respected enough by our friends group to have given him a $150,000 grant to develop his master restoration plan for the Del Mar Mesa vernal pool several years ago. I know IBM well myself, having retired my own wildlife habitat restoration business about 7 years ago. I'm also in my 39th year, giving away my age here a bit, of volunteering with the Friends. As a co-founder and past president of the California Invasive Plant Council, I appreciate a good restoration plan like Dave's that actually limits the use of herbicides to when their use is absolutely necessary. CalIPSI has continuing education programs, for instance, in biological control, mechanical controls, cultural, as well as the judicious use of herbicides. Thank you for your time, and I hope you support this project.
Thank you, Michael. Please call the next speaker.
Michael Carroll, you should be able to unmute yourself.
I think we might have just heard from Michael Kelly.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Susan, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. My name is Susan Baldwin, and I'm a resident of the city of San Diego and a retired planner and active in environmental and land use issues in the region. I urge you to support this project because in addition to setting aside conservation land from development, it's also crucial to repair damage to habitats and species that often happens for years before land is purchased for protection. The project site was a destination, as you well know today, for illegal off-road use in the past, and conservation and resource values can only be reestablished through direct and active habitat restoration. Unfortunately, the years of abuse resulted in establishment of plant weed populations that cannot be effectively controlled by just hand or mechanical methods. The proposed grant includes a thorough system of integrated pest management using all possible methods that includes careful and strategic use of herbicides. Therefore, I urge your support of the Chaparral Lands Conservancy Otay Mesa Habitat Restoration Project. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Next speaker, please.
Cindy, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Cindy Burscano, and I've spent over 40 years as a volunteer with the San Diego chapter of the California Native Plant Society, with an emphasis on rare plant species, conservation, and restoration. I used to live in Chula Vista, so I visited the Otay Mesa area frequently because it supports a lot of rare plant species. And Recon did many vernal pool restorations, largely as mitigation for development in the area. and they were largely successful because of their trained crews who knew their weeds and how to minimize impacts, whether they were hand weeding in the pools or spot spraying glyphosate around the pools to control weeds. I recall seeing that those restored pools had the most Otay Mesa mint that remained in the county. And they did pollinator studies there because of the density of the Otay Mesa mint. I've been in many areas where off-road vehicle use has totally hammered the area. And it takes a lot to restore those areas because it become very weedy. And a great deal of this area is weedy. With targeted application of herbicide, you can get a healthy vernal pool in the area as shown previous to this, and at a reasonably priced project, which is becoming even more pertinent in budget restraint times. So thank you, and I support the project, and I wanted to thank you for funds you previously provided years ago for supporting Willowy Monardella in East Elliott. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Next speaker, please.
Melinda McNaughton, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. I am an environmental advocate. I live in Half Moon Bay. Dear Wildlife Conservation Board, thank you for funding all these amazing projects to protect our California habitat, and especially the wildlife corridor projects. I think this particular project we're speaking of right now is very important as well, but I think we need to consider if herbicides will continue to be used. And wanted to go into a brief reminder of the history of the war on invasive plants. In 1999, Monsanto employee Dr. Nelroy Jackson developed glyphosate herbicides, helped draft the executive order establishing Invasive Species Advisory Committee, where he served as vice chair, and the National Invasive Species Council as well. These councils united government, environmental groups, and herbicide manufacturers with financial and advisory support from Monsanto, DuPont, and Dow AgroScience. Now this language of using chemicals to protect habitat and kill invasive weeds is baked into IPM worldwide on almost every type of land you can think of. Our last refuges, public wildlands, and sensitive habitats struggling against climate change should be pesticide-free, but they are not. Pesticides are now used in national parks, city and county parks, and conservation reserves under the name of habitat restoration and fuel load reduction now. Pesticide industry has successfully marketed its product to scientists and ecologists, promoting them as tools for protection. As a result, pesticides are applied worldwide, their cumulative impacts ignored, despite clear evidence of harm to humans, wildlife, and ecosystems, especially from glyphosate, and it's the cumulative impacts. Yet under industry pressure, governments continue to allow their use, fueling a $70 billion industry that prioritizes efficiency over ecological health. Wildlife Conservation Board, I think this project is very important and has done very good work. However, I urge you to approve this project as long as they do not allow continued use of herbicide and glyphosate, and do not allow it in this particular project. By allowing chemical applications in these types of projects.
Melinda, if I could ask you to wrap up, please.
Thank you. I will. I'm done almost. And by encouraging to allow chemical applications in these types of projects, you encourage proposals that rely on them. I ask the Wildlife Conservation Board to take a stand for healthier ecosystems by prioritizing sustainable, non-toxic alternatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Melinda. Next speaker, please.
Kyle Rice, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the board. My name is Kyle Rice. I'm a senior environmental scientist with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, South Coast Region 5. We would like to provide our support for this project as it would restore 5 acres of highly sensitive and limited vernal pool habitat within the region and would complete many of the recommended management actions identified in the City of San Diego Vernal Pool Habitat Conservation Plan for this particular property. The project is a high priority for region and we look forward to seeing it completed.
Thank you, Kyle. Next speaker, please, which I think puts us at 7.
Yeah, a couple other hands went up.
Okay, we're gonna, after this agenda item, institute a cutoff so we don't keep getting raised hands, and we'll be clearer about that, so apologies. So we'll go ahead and close the queue. And now please call the next speaker.
Doug Johnson, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, excuse me. Thank you. Good morning. This is Doug Johnson from the California Invasive Plant Council. We're a nonprofit organization that supports efforts across the state to protect, restore, and steward our diverse habitats. And we support this application from the Chaparral Lands Conservancy for work to protect priority habitats on Otay Mesa. And an important part of this project, like many restoration projects, is reducing the environmental weeds on the site. And the applicant's approach to reducing the weeds on the site has been well thought through by experienced land stewards to be the most effective and the least damaging, including spot applications of herbicide used along with manual removal and other methods. I would say for anyone interested in learning about the full range of approaches used for addressing environmental weeds, I would encourage you to visit a website hosted by the University of California called WeedCut, WEEDCUT. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Next speaker, please.
Krista Hoffman, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you for taking my comment. My name is Krista Hoffman. I am CDFW's Integrated Pest Management Coordinator, and I am commenting to indicate my full support for the invasive vegetation management methods that are included in the restoration plan for this project. I have studied the non-target impacts of pesticides and contaminants for many years. I have a PhD in toxicology from UC Davis, where my dissertation specifically focused on the toxic effects of pesticides in the environment. The strategic efforts that are planned for the removal of invasive plants that would otherwise spread and require more extensive intervention in the future under this project are justified. The planned integrated methods, including the judicious applications of an aquatic approved herbicide for controlling invasive plants, pose a significantly lower risk to the wildland environment than do invasive plants, which severely impact many aspects, including wildlife habitat, the fire and flood patterns, and water use. As an environmental scientist, I'm committed to using the most effective but least environmentally impactful tools for weed management, and this project's methods for weed removal are justified and based on sound science. Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Could you call the next speaker, please, which by my count is 9. So could you also let us know how many additional people after this speaker in the queue?
Including the speaker, there are 2 raised hands.
Great, thank you. So these
Beth,
are our
you
last
can
two.
unmute yourself.
Okay, this is Beth Mather. I am president of the Friends of Penasquitos Canyon, which was founded about 40 years ago to preserve the canyon from development. And currently we assist the city in the restoration projects within 3 preserves in this area and open space. We've worked with Dave Hogan in his efforts to restore vernal pools on Carmel Mountain and in the Del Mar Mesa. We appreciate his thoughtful approach to restore degraded vernal pools. We fully support his efforts in restoring the Otay Mesa vernal pools with his judicious and limited use of herbicides as part of an integrated plant pest management plan. So when doing restoration on badly degraded land, our experience has been that early use of herbicide greatly improves the chances of success, especially in areas that have high weed cover. So we are fully in support of Dave's effort. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And our last speaker on this agenda item, please.
Re-entered the queue.
Is Mark the second speaker, which was unable to connect?
Yes.
Okay, we'll do Mark and then the final speaker.
Mark, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Apologies. My name is Mark Berninger. I'm the Natural Resource Manager for the City of San Diego. Apologies for not being there in person. Our city's budget couldn't handle the to travel on that, but otherwise I would have been there with Dave. He has been a great partner with the city of San Diego. Pardon me. I fully support this project as a phase 3 of the Otay Mesa Clayton Restoration Project. Again, as he shows in these photos, the project was immensely, the first two phases of this project have been immensely successful. And our staff manage our vernal pool habitat conservation program here at the Parks and Rec Department. We will be managing these projects afterwards. So engaging in the integrated pest management for this project, of course, is something we do as a city, and we will continue on in perpetuity. As David said, this project will need some help because of the development around it, but our hope is in the future, these areas will require less and less of the herbicides and more rely on other methods of invasive plant removal and invasive plant control. Access control also is a big issue. We have fencing that we have put up in conjunction with the Chaparral Lands Conservancy, our vernal pool conservation program as well. So I would say that the city of San Diego and our open space division fully supports this project moving forward, and we appreciate the time and effort that the Conservation Board has put into reviewing these projects and funding the previous phases of this. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mark. And our last speaker on this agenda item.
Brooks, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to comment. My name is Del Brooks, and I'm a board member for the Friends of Penasquitos Canyon. We have been preserving and restoring land for 40 years in San Diego. Dave Hogan is one of the most highly regarded restoration experts in San Diego. And it's important to note that invasive species are recognized as the second largest threat to biodiversity globally. If Dave has included chemical controls in his IPM plan, then we trust his choice. Thank you, and I urge your full support for the project.
You don't. So that's the end of public comment today. We'll bring it back up to board members for questions, or if someone wants to make a motion. Any questions? Discussion?
I'd like to move approval.
I'll second that motion. Roll call, please.
Chair Bonham,
Yes, aye.
Vice Chair Nagami,
Aye.
Member Pavley,
Aye.
Member Peralt,
Aye.
Member Gear,
Aye.
Member Zavaleta.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Congratulations, Dave. Okay, I think unless someone has a strong opinion otherwise, we're gonna go another half hour till 12:30.
I know.
And then see if we can get through or closer and sync up executive session with a quick lunch. Okay,
Great. So Don Crocker, still here for State Route 91B Canyon Wildlife Crossing. Welcome, Don.
Great, thank you. This proposal is to consider the allocation.
Hey, so just, I think what we'll try is this practice. As staff starts presentation, all those in the virtual space that want to comment, please raise your hand now. When we get to the moment I say now for public comment, the queue will be closed for the virtual participation.
This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to Caltrans to upgrade an existing box culvert under State Route 91, whose functionality as a wildlife corridor has been constrained due to a bend in the culvert by replacing the south end inlet with a new structure segment that will straighten the culvert and restore line of sight necessary for wildlife refuge. SR 91 is a nearly impenetrable barrier to wildlife movement between the Santa Ana Mountains and the Chino Hills. The habitat fragmentation caused by the roadway limits the range of mountain lions in the region seeking hunting and breeding territory. An inability to roam freely in search of suitable mates has led to inbreeding and impairment of the genetic health of local mountain lions. This has been confirmed by recent genetic analysis that have indicated significant genetic restriction in the regional population and concluded that if genetic connectivity is not restored, the mountain lion population of the Santa Ana Mountains may be extirpated within 50 years and is possibly as early as 12 years if inbreeding depression sets in. The most feasible way to reconnect the protected habitats is through the modification of a culvert underneath SR 91 in an area known as Bee Canyon. It's for this reason the Bee Canyon area of SR 91 is listed on CDFW's Wildlife Movement Barriers Priority List. Next slide, please. Okay, the pictures here show what the Bee Canyon area looks like. The picture on the left shows SR 91. The road is the primary connection between Orange and Riverside counties. It's up to 14 lanes wide in portions, and it has fast-moving traffic 24 hours a day, making it nearly impossible for wildlife to cross safely. The picture in the center is looking south towards the Santa Ana Mountains and shows the habitat within the canyon that gave the Bee Canyon area its name. The picture on the right was taken while standing in Bee Canyon and shows the Chino Hills. It also shows the south end of the culvert that will be modified by this project. Next slide, please. The culvert at Bee Canyon's functionality as a wildlife corridor has been constrained due to a kink in the culvert that developed incrementally due to several road widening projects that have been implemented over the past 50 years. The kink, which can be seen in the top two photos, does not allow wildlife to see through to the other side of the freeway, which prevents mountain lions and other risk-averse wildlife from using the culvert to migrate. The project will remove the kink in the existing Bee Canyon culvert under SR 91 by replacing the south end inlet with a new structure that will strengthen the culvert and restore the line of sight. This new alignment is represented by the green section of the site map on the bottom of the page. Next slide, please. So the designs for this project actually came from a planning grant that was approved by the WCB in 2022. So we're doing some more cradle to grave stuff here. But for this implementation phase, the project has four main elements, with the primary one being the strengthening of the culvert. The project will also install a sound wall that will mitigate noise and light that deters human-averse species from approaching the culvert. Public outreach necessary to coordinate SR 91 traffic that will be impacted by temporary lane closures during construction will also be conducted. And finally, baseline data that will allow for long-term monitoring of the crossing's effectiveness will be collected. When the project is fully implemented, a historical migration corridor between the Santa Ana Mountains and the Chino Hills will be restored. And the habitat quality of several WCB acquisitions, which can be seen here as orange blocks on the map to the right, will be improved. Therefore, staff recommends the project be approved as proposed. In the audience is Scott Quinnell, a senior environmental planner for Caltrans. And in the online audience is Daniel Ciacella, Caltrans project manager. Thank you. And I believe Scott Quinnell from Caltrans would like to say a word real quick.
Hi, I'm Scott Quinnell with Senior Environmental Scientist Supervisor with Caltrans District 8 in San Bernardino. And we'd just like to thank you for considering this project. It's a really important implementation investment for our area to remove the CDFW barrier, enhance our 30 by 30 stewardship, and improve connectivity in the Western Riverside County MSHCP. This is the second WCB grant, as Don has mentioned, and we're really excited about it. It also provides some really important construction jobs in the area. And we also have a partnership with the Riverside Regional Conservation Authority, the RCA. They've been a great partner in this project. The WCB previously provided grant funds to them to conserve the 700 acres in the corridor to the south of the freeway. So, which made this crossing project a reality to have conservation on both sides of the 91. I'd also like to thank Don Crocker. He's been a great proponent for this project on both phases of this project, and I'd like to thank you all very much.
Thanks so much thanks for the presentation, and thank you for words from Caltrans. A quick question. Oftentimes we get sort of single projects, so we don't see the full picture. Like someone could look at this project and see, oh, WCB is the only funder for this project. Where's Caltrans at? But I've worked in this space long enough to know that there our regional and statewide considerations and coordination and collaboration across the state and in different regions. So I think you could speak to that a little bit, just so we understand better the sort of the bigger picture for transportation and conservation funding.
Yeah, so I mean, this project was part of the, what's called the SHOP, the State Highway Operation and Protection Program. That's the funding program that funds culvert improvements and bridge improvements. This project unfortunately was in fairly good condition. The projects that get money through that program are culverts and structures that are rated fair and poor. So because this is not a fair or poor condition, Caltrans isn't able to contribute money from the California Transportation Commission, which allocates the funds to Caltrans. They're not able to give us any money for this specific improvement. So
you're saying I should have asked my friends to get out there with some sledgehammers and knock down some of that concrete?
Right.
I'm just kidding.
As part of the AB 2344, the Wildlife Connectivity Action Plan, that Caltrans is supposed to, improve corridors in the future. That might be an opportunity for the legislature to provide funds to Caltrans to, fund crossing improvement projects like this in the future.
Yep. I would have another friendly recommendation there, and this is unfair to you at the personal level. But I think for the Department of Fish and Wildlife, what we would hope is your Transportation Commission and the leadership at Caltrans recognize sometimes it's appropriate for a fund source like the board to invest in a project. Other times, we would expect SHOP to step up and cover the freight on those additional projects, so that together we're doing more. So I think that's the message I'd offer as the director of the department back to Caltrans.
Good.
We're to public comment, and I think we might be through on questions, but hang tight for a second. I don't see anyone in the room, and the queue would be closed virtually because we're now at this moment. So do we have any speakers online for this agenda item?
There are no raised hands.
Great. Back up to the board, any discussion? Okay, anyone want to make a motion to approve the item as proposed?
Coming from Southern California and the 91 going through my hometown, this is exciting. I'm really, I love that freeway. I grew up with it, and I'm thrilled that this crossing is getting the upgrades it needs to allow for greater migration. So I'm just really excited and happy to be able to offer a motion to approve this item.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Chair Bonham,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nagami,
Aye.
Member Pavlik,
Aye.
Member Perot,
Aye.
Member Gear,
Aye.
Member Zavaleta. Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm pleased to welcome up James Croft to talk about the San Jacinto Wildlife Area Enhancement Project.
So agenda item 20, if you're in the virtual space, now would be the time to raise your hand in the queue. The queue will close when we get to public comment.
Good afternoon. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to California Waterfowl Association for a cooperative project with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to complete wetland and upland enhancements to benefit migratory birds at the San Jacinto Wildlife Area in Riverside County. The San Jacinto Wildlife Area is located adjacent to the Lake Paris State Recreation Area, approximately 25 miles southeast of the city of Riverside in Riverside County. The wildlife area was designated as a state wildlife area in 1982 and is one of the largest public wildlife areas in Southern California, covering approximately 19,000 acres, including 900 acres of managed wetlands. The wildlife area hosts nearly 30,000 visitors each year for public use opportunities, including waterfowl, upland game bird and small game bird hunting, as well as wildlife viewing. Next slide, please. San Jacinto wetlands are located within a designated priority wetland area within the Sonoran Joint Ventures Implementation Plan. The SJV's Waterfowl Management Supplement establishes that the reduction in habitat quality, availability, and a shortage of freshwater wetlands as the greatest limiting factors for waterfowl populations in the lower Colorado River, Salton Sea, and Southern California regions. The project will contribute directly to the conservation goals of the Sonoran Joint Venture by providing long-term climate resilience, increased habitat acreage, and improved water management capabilities on existing managed wetland and upland habitats. Next slide, please. In addition to being an important area for waterfowl, the wildlife area hosts a variety of avian species, including over 20 species of raptors. Red-tailed hawks, American kestrels, white-tailed kite, and both golden and bald eagles can be seen hunting within the wildlife area and surrounding valley. Wildlife area grasslands and crop edges are home to burrowing owl, and tricolored blackbird colonies nest in emergent vegetation within San Jacinto wetlands, making their way to forage in nearby fields and hillsides. Next slide, please. Water supply availability and cost is the most limiting factor to providing high-quality wetland habitat for managed wetlands, especially in the more arid regions of Southern California. San Jacinto water supplies are delivered via purple pipe as tertiary treated or recycled water from Eastern Municipal Water District. This recycled water has been treated and disinfected and is safe for beneficial uses other than drinking water. All wetland and irrigable upland habitats on the wildlife area are managed using recycled water. And you'll see in the next slide why I think this is the ultimate recycled water project. Next slide, please. I apologize if this map's a little too busy, but we're looking at a map of the project area, including the project improvements. There's an elevation gradient across this map, with the high ground being in the top left corner of the slide and the lower ground being in the bottom right. The bottom right is actually where water supply delivery occurs, so there isn't really a good way to gravity feed from the bottom right to the top left. The project will construct a new water recovery pipeline and pumping station that will allow for the complete recovery of all drained water from the wildlife area's wetland habitat complex. It has been estimated that the wildlife area would be able to recover nearly 1,000 acre-feet of water that is drained from the wetland units each spring. This water would be delivered back to the semi-permanent wetlands and can be reused for irrigation or flood up of seasonal wetlands the following year. This project will create a 200-acre semi-permanent wetland that will serve as a sanctuary, waterfowl sanctuary on the wildlife area on the top left portion of the screen. As those wetland units are flooded during the winter time when water is readily available and cheap, then wildlife area managers can draw down those wetlands and kind of tier use that water down to seasonal wetlands in the middle part of the screen and the lower part of this map, and then use the yellow and black water recovery pipeline to take that water right back to the top and reuse it possibly 2 or even 3 times. That's why I think this is the best recycled water project, where you're starting with recycled water and then we're going to be reusing this water for the benefit of wildlife dependent species 2 or even 3 times. The waterfowl sanctuary will be closed to hunting and will provide habitat for waterfowl brood rearing, provide a resting spot for migratory birds, and a space for the public to enjoy bird watching throughout the year. This is a very important aspect of this project for the more arid region of Southern California, where semi-permanent wetlands wetlands that are flooded during the summertime for waterfowl brood rearing, where they're extremely rare. Next slide, please. 585 acres of seasonal wetland units within the project area will be recontoured to allow for less elevation variation, allowing them to be filled using less water. New water control structures will be installed and swale systems will be built within the wetland units to help move water on and off of each unit more efficiently. Levees will be refurbished, allowing for wetland units to maintain proper water levels while providing wildlife area staff and members of the public safe driving access throughout the wetland complex. These improvements will provide high-quality seasonal wetland habitat for waterfowl, waterbirds, shorebirds, and other wetland-dependent species. Next slide, please. Upland food plots will be leveled and new irrigation pipelines installed to provide efficient irrigations for wheat or milo grain crops planted as forage for wildlife. Currently, limited irrigation capability and uneven elevations across the upland fields allow for only very small strips to be planted within each upland field. Leveling and irrigation upgrades will allow for 75 acres of new uplands to be planted, bringing the total food plot fields to 115 acres. And all of the grain crops that are planted within these upland areas are for the benefit of waterfowl. They're not harvested in any way. They're just left out there for waterfowl and other bird species to use as forage. Staff recommends that the Wildlife Conservation Board approve this project as proposed. Here today to answer any questions you may have is Chad Santier, Director of Wetland Programs from California Waterfowl Association. Thank you.
All right. Any questions from board members? And just flagging, we're going to public comment in a minute. No questions? So do we have any public commenters in the room? Okay, we'll close the queue virtually. Do we have any speakers for public comment online?
There are no raised hands.
Great, thank you. Coming back up to the podium, any discussion, board members? Seeing no discussion, we have a motion.
Move we approve.
I'll second. And roll call, please, Mary.
Chair Bonham,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nagami,
Aye.
Member Pavle,
Aye.
Member Peralt,
Aye.
Member Gear,
Aye.
Member Zavaleta.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Inviting Don Crocker up, 3 times a charm, for the I-5 Sierra Madre Castaic Wildlife Crossing Planning Project.
And those tracking their bingo card, agenda item 21, if you're online, now would be the time to raise your hand to get in the queue. Thanks, Don.
All right, thank you. This proposal is to consider the allocation for a grant to the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority for a cooperative project with the Wildlife Conservation Network and the Nature Conservancy with the goal of improving wildlife connectivity along a stretch of Interstate 5 that bisects protected lands in the Sierra Madre and Castaic Ranges in Los Angeles County. The project scope includes a feasibility and constraints analysis for at least 4 wildlife crossing locations and to identify at least 1 priority wildlife crossing that will have Caltrans documentation, environmental review, and 65% designs developed. Next slide, please. Interstate 5 is the primary road connection between Northern and Southern California, and as such, it has around-the-clock traffic 7 days a week. The project we're talking about now concerns a portion of the roadway that begins at the northern border of the city of Santa Clarita and runs 26 miles northward to State Route 138. In this area, I-5 acts as an almost complete wildlife movement barrier between the protected lands of the Sierra Madre Range in the Los Padres National Forest and the Castaic Ranges in the Angeles National Forest. This has resulted in the area becoming a vehicle wildlife collision hotspot with multiple documented mountain lion, deer, and black bear fatalities. Wildlife is further impacted by a lack of habitat connectivity that impairs wildlife genetic health and contributes to the same problem of mountain lion inbreeding that we just discussed with the SR91B Canyon project. The barrier also hinders ecosystem adaptation to climate change and closes off vital escape routes during wildfires and flood events. Next slide, please. And here's what I-5 looks like in the project area. It's definitely outside the urban sprawl of Los Angeles and the San Fernando Valley, but it's still 6 lanes wide with traffic moving at the 70-mile-per-hour speed limit 24 hours a day. This is just too much for even relatively quick animals like deer to safely cross. There are also several sections like this one that have fencing between the north and southbound lanes that can trap animals on the roadway and increase the likelihood of a collision. But unfortunately, there are almost no other options for animals compelled to cross in this area because the handful of culverts and underpasses there are either not of a design conducive for wildlife usage or are in locations unsuited to human-averse species. Next slide, please. And it's a shame they can't get across the road because there's a lot of habitat that goes right up the road. As you can see from these pictures. The picture on the left particularly shows that this is Cherry Canyon. The cover here is so good that it's hard to even see I-5 in the photo. And this is exactly what wildlife seek as it approaches a roadway. The problem, though, is that this excellent corridor leads to what is basically a dead end. Animals that follow this route are eventually left with two choices: either undertake a risky crossing they most likely won't survive, or go back the way they came and look for another option. Next slide, please. So this project is the first step to alleviating these problems and improving wildlife connectivity between the Sierra Madre and Castaic ranges. This will be done by developing a wildlife crossing infrastructure improvement master plan that will lay out the locations for a system of wildlife crossings for the entire 26-mile stretch of I-5. As part of the master plan, feasibility and constraints analysis will be conducted for at least 4 priority wildlife crossing locations where there are protected lands on either side of the highway. Of these 4 locations, 1 will be deemed the highest priority and have 35 and 65% designs, Caltrans documentation, permitting, and environmental review completed. There will also be outreach to stakeholders in the I-5 connectivity working group to ensure the project reflects local input. Therefore, staff recommends the board approve this project as proposed. In the audience is Chad Christensen from the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority. Thank you. And I think Chad would like to say something.
Good afternoon, board. Chair Bonham, Vice Chair Nagami, congratulations on your position, and then members. We are appreciative of the opportunity to seek these funds. This is a multifaceted project that has many stakeholders involved on our project team. We have the support of Caltrans, District 7. They've been integral in supporting our project and identifying some of the priority locations that they've identified in their SHOP program that does need some maintenance because it is a little under, or they're starting to become dilapidated structures. And so between those and some of the other known spots, we'll do the habitat studies and wildlife studies to know where animals are attempting to cross, combine that with the collision data, and then based on that feasibility of adjacent landowners is really the last part there that makes it possible to make structures connect. And so that is our project at the moment, and we appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
I have strong opinions in this space. At the end of the day, these are just fixable problems. There's no way to argue they're unfixable. It's just limited by imagination and money. They're totally fixable problems. So I appreciate it. Any other? So we'll go to public comment here in a moment.
Yeah, that's a great project. I strongly support it. The only question is, I think there was something similar looking at crossings in this area, like the North Los Angeles County. I forget the details,
Right,
but
if we could actually go back a couple of slides, I can show you it on a map. One more. See that new Hall Pass planning? That's the one I think you're probably thinking of. The blue circle, that is RCD Santa Monica Mountains. They have a very similar planning project to do the same kind of work there. And you can also see the Wallace Annenberg. So you can see the progress we're making in sort of connecting this entire region, sort of north of Los Angeles area.
got it. So it's just a different location a little further north.
Right.
Okay, and you're going to be coordinating.
Yeah,
with
no,
them.
there's a really well-developed connectivity community out there.
Great,
Right now.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, no, well, yeah, but we're not working on that yet. Right. Yeah, cool.
I'd be glad to make a motion for.
Well, we got to go public.
Oh, we should do that too. But I'll ask a question.
But we will ask you to make the motion.
Later.
Oh, I think she does.
Do you have a question?
I did have a question. I think most of the, looking along Highway 5, whether it's RCD or this project as well, we see opportunities of going underneath
Yeah.
the overpass, which makes a huge difference. The reason the 101 is so expensive, it's going over a 10-lane freeway and a 4-lane arterial. And there's raised Highway 5 through there, and there are potential opportunities for them to navigate their way below the freeway, which would be less expensive in the long run.
Right. So we actually wrote this grant up that they may do a large underpass project instead of an overpass project. If you notice, I sort of kept it vague and said crossing structure. And also again, there'll be 4 priority wildlife crossings again. So they're, you basically get two elements out of these large planning projects. You get a shovel-ready, large-scale, typically in the past, they've been overpasses because we knew we were gonna have to go overpass. This one, we sort of left it a little bit, maybe overpass, maybe underpass, depending on what the group says. And then there's the 4 other sort of priority areas that will be, basically, we get those at conceptual design level, and those will definitely include some underpass. So there's a sort of a suite of potential projects that come out of this, both underpass and overpass. And the composition will depend on what the science basically leads to.
Right. And that's the beauty of the planning process. You're calculating a bunch of variables, species need, some like over, some like under, length, darkness, cover, cost. And you're trying to come back with the optimized recommendation. Awesome. Okay. Any other questions? Any public comment in the room here in the auditorium? And so the queue would be closed online. Do we have any commenters in the online queue?
There are 2 raised hands.
Please call our speakers.
Lynn Lambeck, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Lynn Plambeck, Santa Clarita Organization for Planning and the Environment. I'm a 40-year resident of the Santa Clarita Valley, and our organization has been around for 36 years. And I can't tell you the heartache of seeing so many big cats and other large mammals being killed on the freeway. So I'm really excited that you're considering this. And it's also a good partnering opportunity because Caltrans is doing so much lane widening in the area. So thank you, and thank you, Ms. Pavley, for making the motion, or it sounds like you're going to make the motion anyway. I so much appreciate your work on this.
Thank you, Lynn. Next speaker, please.
Neil Sharma, you can unmute yourself.
Good afternoon. Sound check. Is it coming through all right?
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Neil Sharma with the Wildlife Conservation Network. I'm the director of our California Wildlife Program, which is focused on conserving ecological connectivity throughout California. We're one of the project partners here, and glad we've been able to contribute $500K in private funds to the proposed effort. I wanted to just acknowledge the collective effort here with the strong public-private partnership on this project, and also just note that I see it as something representative of what we're seeing as a groundswell of activity to remediate barriers to wildlife movement and ecosystem processes throughout the state. So really just an exciting project in and of itself, and an exciting time for connectivity conservation. And on that note, I want to express my deep appreciation for the Wildlife Conservation Board's leadership and commitment to connectivity conservation, which we know will be essential to support functional and resilient ecosystems. And a big thank you to WCB staff for being so engaged, accessible, and great to work with. So thank you to the board for your consideration of this project.
Thank you, Neil. Appreciate it. Okay, coming back up to the board. Any discussion, or we kind of know who we think might make the motion?
Oh, I'd like to make a motion. That's okay. I move approval of this item.
And a second. Roll call, please.
I'll second.
Oh.
Chair Bonham,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nagami,
Aye.
Member Pavley,
Aye.
Member Peralt,
Aye.
Member Gear,
Aye.
Member Zavaleta,
Aye.
motion passes.
Let's pause for time check. We're rolling to agenda item 22. We'd have 4 more projects and then public comment not on the agenda. It's 12:30. We can keep pushing and sync to executive unless anyone disagrees. Okay. All right. Agenda item 22.
Okay, Michael Shaw will be presenting on Richmond Ranch.
And as Michael comes on down, those online, if you want to speak on this item, now would be the time to raise your hand.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. So the Richmond Ranch is a 1,218 acre fee title acquisition by the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, located along the southern border of the city limits of San Jose, almost immediately off of Highway 101 in Santa Clara County. The property will provide important habitat linkages for plants and wildlife between Joseph D. Grant County Park and Henry W. Coe State Park, as well as along Coyote Ridge from Silver Creek Hills to Anderson Dam and from Santa Teresa Hills to Metcalf Canyon. The proposed property is a portion of a larger 3,653 acre ranch. 944 of those acres are currently owned by the Habitat Agency and 1,487 acres are owned by county parks. Permanent protection of this property adjacent to the conservation lands in Coyote Valley expands safe wildlife movement areas, offers future public access, and presents a multi-impact project that advances state conservation targets to achieve Pathways 30 by 30 goals. Next slide, please. So the property is currently utilized as ranch lands for cattle grazing. It is expected that cattle grazing will be the primary management tool and will continue with the aim to maintain the sensitive serpentine habitat while also reducing grassland fuel load. There are also opportunities for restoration and invasive species management on the property. The property is primarily comprised of California annual grassland, coast live oak forests, and over 365 acres of rare serpentine bunchgrass grassland. It also contains sensitive blue oak woodland, mixed oak woodland, and mixed riparian forests, ponds, seasonal wetland, as well as 8.5 miles of streams. The property will be managed according to the requirements of the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Conservation Plan to meet the Habitat Plan's biological goals and objectives. The Habitat Plan requires the management, monitoring of newly protected lands, and restoration of riparian habitat, wetlands, ponds, and streams. Next slide, please. So the property contains habitat for 7 covered animal species, including the California red-legged frog, California tiger salamander, tricolored blackbird, western burrowing owl, the western pond turtle, and the foothill yellow-legged frog. The bay checker spot butterfly and 3 covered plant species, including the Metcalf Canyon jewelflower, Santa Clara Valley deadlia, Mount Hamilton thistle, are also known to occur on the property. The property will contribute to the protection of both the Coyote Creek and Silver Creek watersheds. The property connects numerous state parks and open space, including the San Felipe Ranch Conservation Easement. By creating this larger swath of protected land, the acquisition of the property as open space can facilitate the movement of wildlife throughout the region. Next slide, please. The Habitat Agency has future plans to transfer the entire protected property, which includes the adjacent larger ranch, to county parks, allowing for public access over a multi-use trail linking the Bay Area Ridge Trail. Habitat Agency will enter into a memorandum of agreement to determine appropriate areas for recreational trails and wildlife conservation areas. This would include allowances for public uses such as hiking, biking, and equestrian uses. Next slide, please. So the fair market value of the property was approved by the Department of General Services for a total of $11,815,000. The landowner has agreed to sell the property at a reduced price of $6,500,000. WCB would provide $4 million, the Coastal Conservancy would provide $1.5 million, and Metropolitan Transportation Commission will provide $1 million. Staff recommend that the project is approved as proposed in the agenda. And with us today is Executive Officer of the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, Edmund Sullivan, and Senior Real Estate Agent Robin Cohn, who are online virtually, I believe, and Dan Medeiros of the Conservation Fund, who can assist with any questions you may have regarding this project.
Thank you. Great presentation. Any questions from board or staff or our guests? Yes? Okay. So now to public comment, and anyone in the room wish to make public comment? Seeing none, our virtual queue would be closed. Do we have any virtual speakers?
We have one raised hand.
Let's call the speaker.
Edmund Sullivan, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I'm Edmund Sullivan, the Executive Officer of the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency, and I would just like to thank Wildlife Conservation Board staff and the board itself for considering this item, and also thank the board and staff for their continued support of the Santa Clara Valley NCCCP. So just thanking you, and you guys do great work supporting conservation and restoration throughout California.
Thank you, Edmund. That concludes our public speakers. Back up for discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Bonham. I have a couple of questions. I just want to say this is an area I know well, and it's an incredibly important place for biodiversity and for connectivity as well. So it's really, really great project, and I'm very excited to see it and the opportunity to secure it. One question I have is that those serpentine habitats, grazing is the tool to manage invasive species and sort of nitrogen pollution effects on the system. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about how successful that's been to date and whether there are additional measures needed, because so much of that biodiversity in that area, depends on managing invasive species.
We'll go ahead and defer to Edmund to answer that question, or Robin, if you can.
Edmund, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yes, appreciate you bringing it up because it is an important tool for managing the invasives. The biomass of California grasslands is very different than it was pre-European settlement. So with the absence of a lot of native grazers, cows have kind of substituted for, the lack of, a robust elk and antelope populations. Plus the biomass is so much more than it was historically anyways. So we have a lot of the rare plants out there. We work in partnership with a grazer, and so far so good. The Conservation Fund has owned this property for the last year, and we've been working with them and the grazer to manage it, and we will continue the management practices. We'll also use adaptive management to understand how grazing, doing certain things are good or not good. Another big challenge is wild pigs, and we have a rare occurrence of the fragrant fritillary out there, and pigs love to dig that up. So that's another invasive challenge that we face on lands in the Diablo Mountains. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Oh, you're
And
welcome.
I just want to make a brief comment that I appreciate seeing the outreach and conversation with the Tamian Nation in here. And that I hope that the opportunities for collaboration that are under discussion include meaningful opportunities for access for cultural activities and so on. I think that's a real opportunity in this landscape that I know that other sort of jurisdictions in the region have been able to make progress on too.
Yes, and we fully intend to do that. And we're also discussing with them opportunities for cultural burns, which could also have some benefits for the biodiversity and rare plants out there.
Wonderful, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Any other questions, discussion? Seeing none,
I'll move that we approve.
I'll second. Roll call, please.
Chair Bonham,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nagami,
Aye.
Member Pavle,
Aye.
Member Peralt,
Aye.
Member Gear,
Aye.
Member Zavaleta,
Aye.
motion passes.
Great. We're going to invite Kurt Malchel back up to talk about the Eden Landing Phase 2 project.
So agenda item 23, if you want to be in public comment, now is the time to raise your hand online. And this will be, we have 3 remaining projects on the agenda.
Thank you. This agenda item is to consider the allocation for a grant to Ducks Unlimited Incorporated for a cooperative project with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, California State Coastal Conservancy, U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to restore salt production ponds back to tidal wetlands and enhance aquatic pond habitat within the Eden Landing Ecological Reserve in Alameda County. Next slide, please. This is one of many projects that make up the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project, the largest tidal wetland restoration effort on the West Coast, set into motion when CDFW and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service bought over 15,000 acres of salt production ponds from private ownership in 2003 And since then, I've been working to restore these areas back to natural tidal wetlands with the ultimate goal of restoring roughly half of the South Bay's managed ponds back to full tidal action. There are 3 areas where the South Bay Salt Pond Project are in process: the Ravenswood Preserve on the west shore of the bay, the Alviso Complex to the south, and the Eden Landing Ecological Reserve along the East Bay where this project is located. The restoration of Eden Landing consists of 2 phases shown in the inset map. Phase 1, completed in 2016, restored tidal wetlands from the San Mateo Hayward Bridge approach down to the edge of Old Alameda Creek to the south. Phase 2, the subject of this proposal, and shown as the striped polygon in the inset map, continues this restoration down to the edge of Alameda Creek Flood Control Channel further south. Next slide, please. The goals of this second phase are to restore approximately 1,300 acres of salt pond to tidal marsh and enhance 800 acres of managed pond habitat. Restoration activities will include levee improvements such as grading and breaching, construction of gradual habitat transition zones between tidal marsh and upland habitat, and revegetation with native plants to improve habitat quality. Soil importation will take place where needed to supplement natural sediment influx and reduce pond depths to successfully transition from open water to tidal marsh at pace with projected sea level rise. Water flow to and within the managed ponds will be enhanced and made more efficient through new water control structures to improve water quality. The project includes monitoring of habitats and ecosystem dynamics to evaluate project effectiveness and guide future actions. Next slide, please. This image gives an example of current conditions: an open water pond extending directly to the base of a waterside levee. These levees will be resloped to facilitate a more gradual transition from tidal wetland to upland habitat. As mentioned before, the former salt ponds in Eden Landing range from open water to salt-crusted mudflats, providing some habitat for wildlife and limited flood protection to the local community. The project would transform most of the open pond areas currently too deep to establish tidal marsh vegetation into restored tidal marsh and enhanced aquatic habitats. Next slide, please. This slide shows existing water control structures planned for modification or replacement to enhance water flow between ponds. The project aims to balance the needs of tidal marsh dependent species such as the salt marsh harvest mouse and Ridgway's rail with other species that rely on pond habitats such as the snowy plover and least tern. Next slide. This project builds on a multi-decadal effort to restore natural tidal wetland and open pond habitat in the South San Francisco Bay to increase biodiversity, improve water quality, protect bayside communities against extreme events, and improve opportunities for recreation and community awareness of the state's natural resources. Staff recommends the Wildlife Conservation Board approve the project as proposed. Joining us in person is Mason Hill, biologist with Ducks Unlimited, and joining us remotely are Renee Spenst, San Francisco Bay and California Coast regional biologist for Ducks Unlimited, John Kraus, senior environmental scientist supervisor with CDFW, as well as Garrett Allen, unit wildlife biologist, also with CDFW. Thank you.
That's great. Any questions for staff, or Karen is an expert in this project?
Well, I am certainly well familiar with this long-standing program. I did have 2 questions. One is just, where's the Bay Trail in this project? Is it to the east, or is there a Bay Trail component?
I believe it is. I'm going to have Mason, but you can get more specific than I am.
Hi, I'm Mason Hill, Ducks Unlimited biologist. If you can go back a couple slides, there's a good image of the overview, and it runs along from the north, comes down from the north, and then goes to the east side. So it'll kind of following that red line on the top right.
Okay.
There's a
On the right
yeah,
hand side.
it'll connect in there and then come down along the right hand side and then snake through there. Some of those portions are not. We're still working on some legal access and things like that. So it's going to be part of a later phase of the project, which is going to be doing the eastern half of those. So we're actually more focused on the ponds closer to the bay shore right now.
Okay. Great, thank you. And then my second question just relates to the conversation we had at the beginning of this meeting, which is federal funding, because I know the feds have been a big part of this salt pond restoration program. So how secure is this money? Is it in contract or?
Yeah, so most of this money is already in contract right now. There was some EPA money we were keeping an eye on, but we do believe that that it's right now it's fine. So and then the other big funder is Coastal Conservancy. Who's
They're good for
state.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any Any other questions? Great. Seeing none, any public comment in the room? And the virtual queue should be closed now. Do we have any folks online wishing to make public comment?
We have one raised hand, John Kraus. You can unmute yourself.
John?
Find it. There we go. Am I unmuted now?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much, and I appreciate WCB's support. I'm John Kraus. I'm the Senior Supervisor for the Unstaffed Lands Program in Region 3, and I just wanted to lend my support to this project. We've been working together with Ducks Unlimited and lots of other partners on moving the Phase 2 project at Eden Landing forward, and it's a very important project. We've been working through a number of delays and otherwise from issues, but this project is well supported in the South Bay Salt Ponds Restoration Project overall. Our partners, our communities adjacent, and otherwise, it's an important tidal restoration project to move this forward. And some improvements in the managed ponds and otherwise. We've got a great team. We've got a great approach to this. And I think from the landscape scale restoration projects that we've been successful implementing underway for a number of years out here, that we've got a great track record. So I appreciate the WCB support. And again, our partners in Ducks Unlimited moving these forward along with the Conservancy and the Refuge, working collaboratively for 2 decades now. And we're ready to get moving on to this next phase implementation wise. So thanks very much for your support, and thanks for allowing me to speak to this. And I'm sorry for diving in a little late in the matter here, but I was just triaging with another meeting.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your perspective. Coming back up to the podium, any discussion? Seeing none. Karen, would you like to make the motion?
Sure, I move that we approve item number 23.
I'll second. Roll call, please.
Chair Bonham,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nagami,
Aye.
Member Pavle,
Aye.
Member Peralt. Aye. Member Gear,
Aye.
Member Zavaleta.
Aye.
The motion passes.
So continuing our tour of California, going over to the east side of the
Yeah,
Sierra.
we've got Aaron Heyman talking about Rough Creek Native Fish Restoration. Thank you.
And as Aaron comes down, those wanting to comment online, now would be the time to raise your hand.
Thank you, Jen. Board members, good afternoon. I'm pleased to present this proposal, which is to consider a project on Rough Creek, a tributary to the Walker River, on property owned in part by the U.S. Bureau of Land Management and in part by a private landowner and cattle rancher in Mono County. The proposal would allocate $1,604,000 in funds for an implementation grant to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife to benefit native fish in the Eastern Sierras. Next slide, please. Set in the Eastern Sierra, this project will occur along all of 24 miles of the Rough Creek watershed from the spring-fed headwaters to the confluence, to near the confluence with the Walker River itself. Next slide. Rough Creek was historically home to a diverse set of fish species native to the Eastern Sierra. However, non-native rainbow trout were introduced to the Walker River and spread into the Rough Creek watershed, where they consumed the native fish. Next slide. Overall, this project would have 3 main components, of which WCB funding would be used for the first 2. The first component will be the installation of a fish barrier at the downstream end of the project to prevent new non-native fish from entering the system. This has already been partly constructed, and WCB funds would be used to complete the installation. The second component would be the removal of all of the existing non-native fish currently in the system. And the third and final component would be the reintroduction of a suite of native fish species to the Rough Creek watershed. This phase would be funded by CDFW. Next slide. This project would support numerous goals and objectives related to native fish recovery and will restore an intact fish community that has not existed in the region for over a century. Staff recommends the board approve the project as proposed. In the audience here with me is Nick Buckmaster of CDFW. And online, I believe, are representatives of both landowners, along with representatives from the Walker Basin Conservancy and California Trout to help answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, this is really exciting to see. I guess the question I would ask is just the barrier prevents the fish from getting back in, the invasive fish on their own. Is there a sense that there needs to be education, outreach, additional measures to avert the possibility that somebody puts them back in?
Luckily, the risks of that are quite low. This site, the Rough Creek watershed, is in a pretty remote area, and land ownership is pretty much completely controlled by either this private landowner, who is not a fan of trespassers, and BLM, which is certainly open to the public, but so remote, there isn't obvious access points. There aren't established trails and the likes to sort of get non-native fish to this watershed.
I would say, board member, and not really having consulted with our staff in the room, I do expect the department's kind of Eastern Sierra program would have educational dynamics around, the value of this restored stretch for native species. And of course, enforcement, if it were ever to see someone doing something they shouldn't be doing, would take their own action.
Great. Yeah, thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Moving to any public comment in the room?
We have a guest, I guess, that wants to speak.
Come on up.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity here, folks.
Might want to lean towards the microphone. Remind us who you are.
Oh, I'm Nick Buckmaster with DFW's Bishop Field Office. I'm a senior environmental scientist supervisor there. Thanks for giving us the opportunity for this project. There's kind of two things to really touch on that Aaron already mentioned, but I feel like are really cool. And that's that we have like a working cattle ranch, working with the federal government, working with multiple nonprofits and the state to recover a species assemblage. And the other is the intent of this project and this creek is remote. It's away from what we perceive to be the #1 threat, which would be reintroduction of non-native fish. And it's a shift from this single species management we have of like, we treat threatened trout as a problem and we try to restore a species. Like the Lahontan fish assemblage, which we're bringing back, at one point was the entire eastern half of California, Nevada, Southern Oregon. They exist intact nowhere in that entire 3-state area. This would bring them back, and it's pretty cool, just from the fish nerd side and the ecology side. But
yeah, you can't tell, but he's super excited. Thanks for adding that.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think a few of us would take an invitation to come over when you're doing the field work, but we'll leave that for another day. Do we have anyone in the virtual queue to comment?
Hands. Marina, is she a project partner?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Marina, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Marina Nation here, Senior Project Manager with California Trout of the Eastern Sierra region. We have partnered with CDFW on several similar projects in the Eastern Sierra, and we give full support for this particular project for Rough Creek native fish restoration. So thank you.
Thank you, Marina. Next speaker, please.
Jeff Hunewell, you can unmute yourself.
Jeff, you out there? Why don't we go to our third speaker?
There we
and then
go. Can you hear me?
Yep, gotcha.
This is Jeff. Can you hear me?
We can.
Oh dear.
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay. This is awkward. This is Jeff. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. Excellent. All right. Well, sorry for that glitch. I'm just thrilled that we've come to this point. We've worked, we being Nick and Fish and Wildlife, BLM, several private groups, Jessica Abbott and ourselves toward this moment. And we're really glad that it's going to happen. It's really exciting to have this group of fish restored into this really nice creek. The other thing that I'm happy about is that as a rancher, we'll have a working cattle ranch there, and we're very aware that we need to be careful with our grazing, and of course, but the stream is in good shape now. There's a good rainbow trout fishery, so we're really thrilled because I think this the Lahontan and all their other species will do very well there. And so I'm fully supportive of this project. Thanks.
Jeff, on behalf of the board, we just want to thank you as a landowner. The most durable and lasting restoration happens when many partners and landowners can combine their spirits. So thank you.
You bet.
And I think our last speaker, we had 3.
Jessica Abbott, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, I'm Jessica Abbott. I'm the Conservation Director with the Walker Basin Conservancy, and we're a local nonprofit in the area that does work throughout the region. And we have been collaborating on this project and fully support implementation of this project. We also have some funding through the Fish and Wildlife Service and have some habitat improvement planned in the area. And I just want to echo what, Nick and others have said, that this is a really unique opportunity to restore a native fish assemblage in a really special place. The Bodie Hills, have a lot of value to a variety of different wildlife species, and having, restoring a native fish population would just add to that and making it a really unique and special location. Just wanted to show my full support, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Jessica. So concluding public comment, coming back up to the dais, any discussion? Anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
I will second the motion. Roll call, please.
Chair Bonham,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nagami,
Aye.
Member Pavle,
Aye.
Member Peralt,
Aye.
Member Gear,
Aye.
Member Zavaleta.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
All right. Last project, then we'll have public comment on items not on the agenda. We'll break for closed session so the meeting isn't ended.
Yeah.
We'll come back pretty quickly, 30 minutes or less, and we'll wrap up the meeting.
So I want to invite Alexa Dunn to talk about this next project, which I love for 2 reasons. One, it's a great name, Ginocchio Schwendel. I'm not going to lie. And 2, this is our first project with Save Mount Diablo. These guys are really relentless advocates for protecting the lands around Mount Diablo, and they've been coming to us for a while, and we're excited to have our first project with them, hopefully many more. So Alexa, take it away.
Perfect. Thank you. Agenda item 25 is a proposal to consider the allocation of a grant to Save Mount Diablo to acquire approximately 98 acres of land for the protection of oak woodland habitat for the benefit of listed species. The property is located near Clayton in Contra Costa County. Next slide, please. The property is contiguous to Save Mount Diablo's Marsh Creek 5 property and is within the strategic and high priority Marsh Creek Wildlife Corridor, a 33-mile waterway that empties into the Delta. The Marsh Creek Corridor is a special priority for the East Contra Costa County HCP and CCP. This acquisition will contribute to maintaining and restoring wildlife and fish corridors for increased resiliency in the face of habitat fragmentation and climate change. This property will also be Save Mount Diablo's first acquisition from the historic Ginocchio ranching family, who owns nearly 7,000 acres on and around Mount Diablo. Next slide, please. The Ginocchio Schwindel Ranch property and its neighbor, the Marsh Creek 5 property, have extremely rare day-site volcanic habitat. This complex geology leads to complex soils, which then lead to rich botany. Due to the geology, the volcanic sites support a different plant community and various rare plant species. Their vegetation is a brighter green and lusher than the surrounding areas. The photo on the slide shows a sample of the rare dacite volcanic habitat. Next slide, please. Given the rare habitat type, this property could host an unusual variety of plants, such as endemic Contra Costa manzanita and Mount Diablo fairy lantern, as well as threatened and endangered species such as the Alameda whipsnake, California red-legged frog, California tiger salamander, and golden eagles. Next slide, please. Staff recommends the project be approved as proposed. Here with us today in support of the project is Ted Clement, Executive Director with Save Mount Diablo. I believe has some words for you.
Greetings. My name is Ted Clement, Executive Director of Save Mount Diablo, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Save Mount Diablo is a nationally accredited not-for-profit land trust founded in 1971. Our organization is a land conservation mission focused on Mount Diablo and its entire mountain range that it is a part of and sustained by, the Diablo Range. The Diablo Range is 200 miles long and it runs through 12 counties, with Mount Diablo in its northernmost county of Contra Costa. The Diablo Range is an incredible wildlife habitat corridor supporting species like the California condor, golden eagles, tule elk, mountain lions, and many other creatures. The Diablo Range is comprised of over 3.5 million acres of land, with only about 25% currently protected. It provides California with one of its greatest opportunities to meet many of its 30 by 30 goals. We are thrilled and thankful to be on the verge of starting a conservation partnership with the California Wildlife Conservation Board by working together to protect the strategic Genocchio-Schwindel Ranch. This property, located near Mount Diablo, has rare volcanic soils, endemic and enlisted species, and it is contiguous with other conserved land in the important Marsh Creek. Further, we are working to acquire the Genocchio-Schwindel Ranch from the most significant landowning family in Contra Costa County, the Genocchio family. Together with the WCB, we look forward to protecting the Genocchio-Schwindel Ranch and other strategic properties within the Diablo Range. We thank you for considering our application and for your great conservation work. And I must say, working with the WCB staff from the executive director down has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
It's music to our ears. Thank you for that. Do we have any public up here for any comments, questions, concerns?
I had just a question. I'm certainly supporting this project. I was curious about long-term operation and maintenance because it's sort of an island separated. There's state parks on either side, but not adjacent. So how does that work?
It's a great question. This property is contiguous with other land that Save Mount Diablo has protected. So our stewardship staff and volunteers will be doing the day-to-day management of the property.
So you operate and maintain adjacent properties?
We do, that is correct.
It wasn't easy to tell that on the map. So.
Okay, yes, we will be maintaining it. Thank you.
All right.
Yes, great project, and I'll be supporting it. Just love to hear about working with new groups, so welcome. I just wanted to welcome you here and just glad to sort of get the word out. I was surprised to hear you've been around since 1971. Where have you been? And what were the conditions that sort of led to this partnership? We are trying to reach out to groups that we haven't worked with before, non-traditional groups, and just want to hear about sort of your journey.
Thankfully, Save Mount Diablo has gone through a lot of growth in the last decade or so, and we've greatly expanded our partnerships, and we are so thrilled to be on the verge of this partnership with the WCB. Our donor base has more than doubled over the last few years. We have incredible momentum. When I started at the end of 2015, our geographic scope covered 2 counties, the northernmost 2 counties of the Diablo Range. We now cover all 12 counties. We've gone through incredible growth, and we're so grateful to be here. And with this growth and momentum, do great things together. Thank you.
Anyone in the audience wish to make public comments? And this would be the moment the online queue is closing. Do we have anyone virtually that wants to make public comment?
There are no raised hands.
Come back up to the podium. Any discussion? Or anyone ready to make a motion?
I'm happy to move this one. And I can tell you where they've been knocking on the door at the Coastal Conservancy.
I'll second.
All right, roll call, please, Mary.
Chair Bonham,
Aye.
Vice Chair Nagami,
Aye.
Member Pavle,
Aye.
Member Peralt, Member Gear,
Aye.
Member Zavaleta. Aye. Motion passes.
Congrats. Yep, so that brings us to the conclusion of the project part of the agenda. We now have public comment or items not on the agenda, And we'll give it a second. Let's start by surveying the room. Anyone in the auditorium want to make public comment on an item not on the agenda? All right. Seeing none, do we have anyone in the virtual queue for this agenda item 26?
There are 2 raised hands.
Great. So we'll start with each speaker, 2 minutes, and please call the first speaker.
Kara Woodruff, you can unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. My name is Kara Woodruff. I'm the district director for Senator John Laird, who's your newest member of your advisory committee. I wanted to let you know I've been listening in on this meeting on his behalf and just couldn't be more excited about all the projects that you approved today and just in general being in here on behalf of Senator Laird. We are dedicated and committed to supporting our efforts at WCB. And I noticed earlier Dr. Norris had mentioned potentially moving meetings around to different parts of the states. And I just wanted to offer that if you have any intentions on coming to the Central Coast in the next year or so, I'm very happy to help support your efforts in planning something here. Thanks again for this opportunity and really appreciate the service of all of you. Take care.
Thank you, Carol.
I think I speak for the board when I say that Central Coast would always be amazing. Thank you, Kara.
I mean, that's California.
There's nowhere.
It's awesome. So Carol, thank you. And our last speaker on item 26, please.
Catherine Anderson, you can unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Catherine Anderson, a Wildland Management Master's student at CSU Chico. I want to say that I appreciate the work that you guys do and the projects that you funded, but I would like to comment in response to the year in review. So when talking about working with Indigenous communities, we are moving in a positive direction, but I wouldn't be so quick to pat ourselves on the back. True land back comes with no strings attached, and by requiring indefinite public access on the land that we remediate and return, we're only continuing our colonization of their stolen historic lands. The land back is half-hearted in that we are giving them land to be responsible for stewarding without the full benefits of using that land for private cultural matters. I understand why, when public funds are applied to private lands, there needs to be easements. However, I strongly believe that there should be an exception for land back projects, and I hope that you all can support that vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Appreciate it. So that's the conclusion of the agenda, but we're going to break for executive session. Jen will tell the board members where, if you need to eat lunch while we do that. I don't think it's more than 30 minutes. It's a quick executive session. And then what will happen is the board comes back, Colin will report, and we'll gavel out the meeting at that moment. So taking a break and shouldn't be more than 30 minutes.
Yep.
Where are we headed?
Where are we? Great.
We're back on.
So the board is coming back from closed session. And now we are going to turn it over to the board's counsel, Colin Mills, for an update.
Yes, the board met in closed session regarding pending litigation and gave direction to staff in the Attorney General's office.
And with that, we've reached the conclusion of our meeting and I'd like to gavel us out.
Awesome. Well done.